We want to augment and innovate our ocean coastal Great Lakes services and data provision and collection. And we want to do that while doing increased stakeholder engagement, ensuring service delivery in an equitable fashion, and helping to grow a new workforce for tomorrow. So that gray little circle in the middle is acknowledging that none of those boxes can be separated. They all have to work together. And that's what we're doing in GLOS every day. So we're going to try to build a roadmap by the end of the calendar year, build a plan for increasing the sort of core service delivery components, and help to continue to work on that solution space, which you all work on every day in terms of meeting end user needs. And so finally, I wanted to wrap up my conversation with you to say thank you to GLOS for all of your work, your Smart Great Lakes initiative, Smart Great Lakes strategy, and for making IOOS a success in the Great Lakes. Each individual RA does a lot of work bringing people together, understanding stakeholder needs, and translating data and information into services. Another piece of success right now is the Straits of Mackinac are pictured up there, and you've just deployed the new HF radar surface current monitoring technologies there, and you're doing the hard work of getting the FCC licenses and getting everything in order for that. So thank you for that. And you just got recertified as for the purposes of data management, and that certification is a really important thing. We failed to talk about it enough, I think. And I've been changing my tune on that and making sure that when I talk to other NOAA programs and explain to them what GLOS does and what GLOS does for and with NOAA as a sort of a quasi-federal agent in the field, meeting needs in a region, it's because of that certification that I'm able to explain people, they are part of NOAA. GLOS is nonprofit, not NOAA, not Fed, but they're part of NOAA by legislation, and by the certification, we have shown that that's something that we really believe in. So I'm trying to pass that message forward and use it a lot. That, I'll hand it back to you. To Gerhard, come on up here and we'll see if we can get your slides going. Did you get instructions on how to do this?
Nope.
Do you have slides?
Oh, is that how that works? Which way is it? This forward? Oh, there we go. Okay, great. Hello, my name is Gerhard Kuska. Is that okay for everyone? Not too loud? Great. Thank you. Thank you, Kelly, for having me. Thank you for the chance to come here in person. It's an evolution, and I'm happy to be out, probably like most of you are as well. I'm here representing the IOOS Association as its board chair. Kelly and Lynn serve on the board as well. And I hope to very quickly give you an overview of what we're doing. It may take some side conversations to delve into the details, but I suspect many of you know what we do, but I felt obligated to tell you a little bit about what the association does. Advocacy, dealing with things that would be common across the regions, working with our federal partners and some of the non-federal partners to bring together the expertise, meet national standards, but allow us to focus on the regional nuances that are important in each of our areas. Thank you, Kelly and Lynn, for your service, for your time. You know, everyone's got a lot to do, and we have a great team, small team, but the board members play an important role in keeping the momentum going. We put together a strategic plan a few years ago, informed by the IOOS strategic plan. We tried to put some measurable goals in here. And one of the biggest ones is number one, increasing our funding by 100%. Now, yeah, I hear chuckles. But if you remember back in 2009, the legislation that created IOOS, the IOOS program, the federal public-private partnership, asked for an assessment of what it would cost to run this network. And at the time, there was an assessment. NASA Jet Propulsion Lab crunched the numbers. There was a federal number. We'll leave that for a side moment. But the regions outside, those of us working academic institutions with local, state, federal partners and the private sector, that number was $540 million a year per year for 10 years. We're currently just a little over 40 million. So it's an order of magnitude less. So it's not a reach to think that we need $100 million. And so, look, we need to set our sights. There's a lot of things I'm going to talk to you about appropriations in a second. Is that right? Yeah, there we go. One of the two challenges, we have two challenges, big challenges that we face in how we budget. One of them is that we don't enjoy adjustments to the base as many federal agencies do. So dealing with things like inflation on an annual basis when you're fairly budget limited is challenging. Salaries are going up at our institutions, healthcare costs going up, energy suppliers, manufacturers, et cetera, and we're sort of held here. So every year we're having to do the same and more with a little bit less money in effect. The other big challenge is infrastructure. When the infrastructure discussions started on Capitol Hill, we were involved from the beginning in trying to ensure that IOOS was adequately represented. We struggled with managing expectations. We had really high hopes. We put together an assessment, and this is actually a modest number based on what we thought would be a reasonable number that we could as the highest priority. So the assessment looked at different types of infrastructure, including cyber infrastructure. And we came up with a number of about $137 million over the next 5 years for the entire nation, for the regional associations. A lot of work went into this, and I'm grateful for what you did in the Great Lakes to contribute to this document. We were in both the Build Back Better bill at 500 million shared with ocean mapping, so that wasn't specified what it, but IOOS was specifically named. As a result, the Hill staff thought we couldn't be named in the BIF, which ultimately ended up becoming the IIJA, the legislation that passed. When the Build Back Better bill was renegotiated and then tabled, we were left with just the BIF infrastructure legislation. Now that had 150 million, 100 in operations research and 50 in acquisitions for just oceans, coasts, and Great Lakes observing. Not specified for IOOS, but there was an understanding that Congress intended a certain part of that to go to us. We worked hard, not just as an association, but also with our Federal Advisory Committee. And thanks to you guys contacting members, stakeholders, and others to express their interests, we're expecting, we hope, a substantial part of the 100 million that went to NOAA for observing. We don't know what it is. We are trying to be careful with expectation management. The spend plan, and I want to thank the IOOS Program Office for all that they did, Carl and his team, in advocating internally at what was a very difficult process, I'm sure. There's always going to be needs at NOAA, and particularly when something like this generationally comes about. We don't enjoy a pack line. We don't enjoy an acquisitional line for annual big purchases. So we have to fund that out of our normal operations. Remember, we're still trying to keep a sustained observing system going. Every region is. And so it's difficult to fund these large acquisitions out of that. We hope to hear back very soon. And we hope that that is going to be something that allows us to put a down payment on the aging infrastructure and some of the major gaps we have in infrastructure. Now, as to our appropriations, I'm just going to give you a quick overview. We could have an in-depth discussion, but you know, I'll be honest, we were a little bit disappointed this year. And I think everybody was. We had a historic request. We requested last year for FY22, $56.5 million for the regional associations. We were at 40.5, right? So it was a dramatic increase. We got great feedback from representatives, senators around the country. when we did our Hill visits with the appropriators and others. Congress came out with 47 million out of the Senate and 50 million out of the House. Again, historic appropriations for our program. The president's budget was 69.5 million. Again, historic. Fortunately, no one foresaw the Ukraine war. No one foresaw the repercussions of foreign policy. And the consolidated bill that came out dropped everyone down, and we ended up with 41. So 500,000 more than before. Took the wind out of our sails a bit, but we're hopeful that there's understanding, there was recognition in Congress, and that this result is not a reflection of what Congress and what the country thinks about observing, but rather a side effect of the politics of the day, unfortunately. Let me continue with what we're doing this year. Look, we had our historic request last year, and we recognize that infrastructure is going to continue to be a problem. Even if we receive, let's say, a third of that $100 million in infrastructure funding, we still would have a delta of about 100 million. So we thought it responsible to request that of Congress. Say, look, this is still here. We don't know if you're going to have another infrastructure bill. Politically, it seems hard to believe that no matter what happens in the fall with the midterm elections, that we would see another infrastructure bill in the next couple of years. So we have that need still. So we accepted the 50 million that as core support to deal with some of those challenges we have in not just inflation, but also in dealing with the rest of our cooperative agreements, right? We have these cooperative agreements where we're funded at up to $30 million, but obviously the appropriations are not there. So we need to see increased appropriations to fully fund our work plans, our proposal work plans for the coming 5 years. Further, we wanted to express that need for the infrastructure, as I mentioned, and so we added 20 million, and then the 5 million are the cooperative innovation competitive grants, the OTT and the CompT, and the modeling and the technology transition for 5 million. So that's 75.3 million. We've received strong feedback, I think, from what I've been hearing from members around the country. And so we'll see what happens with the budget. But I think we're primed to continue emphasizing the needs and looking for that feedback if politics will allow us to do that. I'm going to just talk about one or two things that have become important. One is harmful algal blooms. Congress has expressed interest. We've seen growth in the number of pilot projects and funding that Congress has directed IOOS to work on. Starting back in FY20, where we had 5 pilot projects. In 21, we went up to 7 pilot projects. And now we're developing this community of practice. Again, different parts of the country deal with this issue differently. Some are much more advanced than others. I know in our region, we're just starting up because we've had to focus on other things. And for all the reasons we've stated, we haven't been able to devote the time or the resources to fully develop our capabilities and our capacity. The other thing is coastal climate. You know, over time, we weren't able to use the word climate in our Hill visits. We would talk about other things, recurrent flooding, and even sea level rise at times was a challenging term in some offices. Now with the administration's position and with what seems to be, depending on the office you're in, generally an accepted position that climate change is there, we need to take steps. Our role in helping assess, provide the information to be able to make the decisions. We put together in a report detecting the coastal climate signal with 5 broad recommendations: expanding observations, modernizing and recapitalizing our infrastructure, innovating new technologies, increased data integration, and equitable services, which has become an important part. I'm going to talk about DEI in just a second. We have a climate series that's ongoing, and we've proposed a task team within the IOOS, which is the interagency body that oversees IOOS at the federal level. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility has become an important topic, not just in the federal government, but around the country over time. And IOOS has tried to support the regions in how they find practical ways to address diversity in their regions, either through partnerships, through their own staffing, through their access to communities and serving communities. And so we have hired a fellow for the year, Ashley Pfeiffer, who is working with the regions, developing best practices, supporting where possible to facilitate information sharing. I mean, we're excited she's getting around to the regions to see how she can help, and each region is different. Some have embraced, some boards have embraced policies and committees. Others are looking for specific things they can do on a day-to-day basis to get to communities, tribal communities or other communities that are otherwise underrepresented or underserved. This award was established, now that's a Scots Gaelic word. I was told by my Scots Gaelic tutor that it's somewhere between courage and carriage. So if you pretend you're Shrek, the cartoon character, and say courage, I mean, that might be close to what it means. It means friend in Scots Gaelic, and it was established in honor of Rue Morrison, who sadly tragically passed away a few years back. He was our MARACOOS Northeast director. And the idea is to really honor someone, a person that has really been a supporter, a friend of ocean and coastal observing. Rue was our first recipient. Dr. Libby Jewett was our second, and we're currently looking for nominations for this year's award. Not finally, but this is an important step and a historic one for us too. Josie Quintrell, our executive director, who has been here since before we were called the IOOS Association, when we were called NIFRA, the National Federation of Regional Associations, has let us know that she will be retiring this summer. It's a big step, big change for us. We're in the process. We have a search committee. We have an entire process. We've put out, you may have seen, I hope, an advertisement for another new executive director, and we're currently in the process of accepting applications. If you know of folks, please encourage them to apply. We'd really like to have a strong candidate pool to choose from. And before I continue, let me invite Kelli up here for a moment.
Hi, Josie. We wanted to, since we have you here, Josie, we wanted to take some time to express our gratitude to you and congratulate you on your retirement. You have been such a fierce advocate for the IOOS regional associations, and I have personally learned so much from you. And so we have a little gift here. Can you come up?
Please come up.
Since we know you're originally from Ohio and you like to tell us all about your affinity for Lake Erie growing up in the Cleveland area, we got you this sort of like bathymetry engraving of Lake Erie. So thank you, Josie.
Thank you, Kelli. And thank you, Josie. Yeah, I don't want to dwell on this now, but it's going to be a big loss for us. But we respect that change happens, and we need to move on. And hopefully, with a new executive director and the support of the board, we will be able to build on the foundation that you've built over these many years. You know, I just have one or two slides going forward here. You know, I mentioned earlier this need to increase our funding. And I mean, ultimately, it's not just really about the funding. It's really about achieving what was originally the vision for IOOS. I mean, this started back in the 90s. That thinking evolved and matured and was reflected in the discussions and the recommendations of the U.S. Commission on Ocean Policy, which came out in 2004, the fall of 2004, with its final report. And it laid out an entire chapter and a series of recommendations, some of which have been implemented. And we have come a long way, thanks to the work of folks in this room, folks across the country, the folks in the IOOS program office, and Carl, who was preceded by Stenka, who we're lucky to have with us here today, who was the office's first director. We have come a long way, but we still have a lot to do, not just in terms of fundraising and in being able to fund all the work that we want to do, but really in the recognition and the positioning of IOOS and the regions and what was originally intended, not as a competitor, not as some little tool or some funding authority, but really across partnership, across sectoral, across public-private entity that is able and system of partnerships that is able to provide every level of data services needed for the products, whether they're made by IOOS or made by private sector or government, to serve the needs of our communities. That seems like a very large vision, but that's what folks came up with more than 20 years ago. And we've been lucky to have on our board in the IOOS Association some of those original folks who recently got together and came up with ideas of how we might do that, including ideas of identifying and targeting new allies and champions. Some of the original ones we have passed on or left, and we need high-level folks that can reach out to members of Congress personally, that can reach out to senior administration officials that carry the gravitas and are willing to support us and advocate on behalf of IOOS. We have 17 agencies in this partnership. NOAA is the lead. That means stop, right? Okay, thanks. Yeah, it's a really weird way to say stop. I'm going to associate that poor woman with negative things from now on. Okay. Doubling our budget, I mentioned, and really strengthening the partnerships, including lesson sharing in my last slide, is really just an example of where we might start. There's a lot of great stuff happening in all regions, and lots of times we're so busy in our day-to-day jobs that we don't really get to share and learn from each other. And so I'm excited about today's sessions and panels, but there are many examples around the country that I think we need to take an opportunity. And in some cases, they're transferable, or parts of them are. And I think that there's some really great things happening here in the Great Lakes, and I look forward to us sharing that with the rest of the country and seeing where we might leverage and build on the great things you're already doing here. So with that, I'll just stop. I'm sorry I went over, but thank you very much for having me.
All right. Well, thank you, Carl and Gerhard, for that overview. Before we get into our panels, I'm just going to do a little bit of a transition. First, I want to thank our sponsors for the meeting today: DIG, Spin Dance, RPS, IOOS, NOAA, Kongsberg, Mazarine Ventures, So Far Oceans, Bedrock Ocean, M2 Ocean, Mitchell's Construction, R2 Sonic, Sail Drone, and Med Ocean. Thank you so much for your support. I think we're going to have a lovely evening at the offshore rooftop, in large part because of your contributions. So thank you so much for being here, and also sharing your expertise with folks in the Great Lakes region. We really appreciate it. So this is an acronym and maybe an age test. Who knows what this means? Golan. If you know, you know. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over the history of GLOS with everyone here. I know that there are some new faces. Let's just say it's been a long journey since I first arrived at GLOS in 2009. Sometimes I think, 13 years, it feels like 30, but I think that might just be me getting old. I don't think that that's really GLOS's fault. And if you've heard me talk before, you know that I talk a lot about the changing trends we've seen over time. people changing the way they access and consume data and information, the complexity and the type of data and information that people are looking for. And this has really led to a changing role for GLOS as well. It might not look exactly like what people imagined in like 2006, 2008, when it was just getting established. But I think GLOS is meeting a moment and serving a necessary role for what the Great Lakes region needs now in 2022. And one of the biggest reasons why all this good work is possible is because it's not just me anymore. We have a great team, and I'd like to take a minute just to acknowledge them now. And I'm going to go in order from the longest time you've been here to the most recent time you've been here. So Becky, you know what's coming. Becky Pearson, Chief Operations Officer, please stand up. Just say hello when I call your name. We have Sneha Badbadi, who's, I don't think she's participating virtually, but yes, there's her face. And actually, for those of you who are giving presentations today, as Gerhard learned, she will let you know when your time is coming to an end. She's our senior advisor for DMAC. David Fitch in the back, our fearless AV guy, and also communications specialist, who's really the brains behind all the amazing newsletters and other communications that you see come out of GLOS. Tim Kearns, our CIO, who I'm sure most of you know and have met, especially yesterday. Lyndon Brinks, our geospatial analyst, and the muscle really behind Lakebed 2030, I'd say. Is Katie in the room? She might be out in the hallway. Katie Rousseau, our Smart Great Lakes liaison. Ana Serviente, our Chief Technology Officer. Shelby Bruner, our Observing Technology Manager. And last but not least, where's Joe? Joe Smith, there he is, our Cyber Infrastructure Engineer. I also want to thank my board members who have really been so supportive and empowering me really to put this incredibly talented team together. So let's have an applause for the entire Great Lakes team. Thank you. When we first released our strategic plan at the end of 2019, I'm not sure how many of you remember that, we had set some ambitious goals for ourselves, and very quickly into 2020, as we all know, the pandemic arrived. And I thought, well, we might have to revisit and reset our expectations because of how our work routines are being interrupted and all the uncertainty around like the political landscape and how that might influence funding or, really how we did anything, frankly. But as a testament to the amazing team that I just introduced, we have made some incredible progress over the past couple of years. And if you'll indulge me for just a second, particularly with the Smart Great Lakes Initiative, I want to feature, again, we had our initial Smart Great Lakes Initiative meeting at the end of 2019 in Toronto. And we're working on building a coalition of partners to get around this idea. And then the pandemic happened and everything went virtual. And I thought, how are we going to convene people and get them on board with this effort over Zoom? This is going to be impossible. But amazingly, over 70 partners came together without funding and without a mandate, which I think is incredibly impressive. Wrote this common strategy document, which has served as a guidepost for the initiative moving forward. And also, I remember telling Katie, I think we're going to have to just write this document ourselves and let people comment on it or provide feedback, because no one's going to want to take the time to write this document again over Zoom when they're overburdened with everything else. But no, they were like, thank you for this draft, but we're going to do it ourselves. We want to write it from scratch. So this was really a grassroots effort of partners in the Great Lakes region coming together. After the common strategy was released, we had a lot of great organic media attention, which helped lead to the congressional briefing that you heard Debbie Dingell talk about at the beginning of this year in January. Debbie Dingell's been a huge supporter of Smart Great Lakes and is always looking to help support through legislation where possible. And also as a result of that congressional briefing, Congresswoman Lisa McClain, who's in Michigan's 10th district, I believe, the thumb of Michigan, reached out to us about supporting our Lakebed 2030 initiative in the FY23 appropriations. So the fact that this has all happened over the past 2 years during a pandemic is just incredible to me. And you're going to hear more about Seagull, later in the meeting, so I won't go into too much detail about all the progress and success. You'll see it for yourself. But also with our observing portfolio, we've managed to initiate the Smart Great Lakes mini grant opportunity, which really increased the number and diversity of projects that we've been able to support. We just had a great meeting yesterday focused on our Lakebed 2030 initiative that we're helping to support, and all the great work that's coming out of that. And as you heard Gerhard talk about the IIJA, we expect to be able to take advantage of that new funding source as well, and hoping to tackle the next major monitoring gap in the Great Lakes, which is winter observation. So just released a winter obs RFP and hope to get some good work funded as well. So you're going to learn a lot more about this progress in the panel sessions that we have coming up. And I hope that you can take some of this information that you're learning back to your organizations and think about where new partnerships might exist in the future. And so finally, I'm just going to wrap up. This meeting is a great opportunity, obviously, to celebrate all of these accomplishments that we have. And I have to say, I'm feeling especially grateful because we are hosting this meeting in my hometown, Chicago. I've had some fun reminiscing with folks this week, catching up with colleagues and, sharing tips for like places to get a good Italian beef sandwich or whatever and other things to do. I like to think that I am a quintessential Chicagoan. I am the third generation of both Polish and Mexican immigrants who moved to the city in the 1930s. So most of my family's American roots are really connected to this city. I learned that I speak Chicagoan, actually. I do speak a little bit of Polish and Spanish, but I learned I speak Chicagoan when I moved to Michigan, and no one knew what a French room was. So who in the crowd wants to explain what a French room is? It's the living room, for those of you who don't know. And this city is also where I first discovered my interest in environmental science and policy. In high school, I learned about, obviously, the history of the city and how they reversed the flow of the Chicago River. So it really feels good to be having our first in-person annual meeting since 2018 in a place that is so sentimental to me. And in the spirit of gratitude and celebrating our origins, I would also like to acknowledge the indigenous communities that call the Great Lakes home. We're obviously convening today because of our shared sense of stewardship and affinity for the Great Lakes. So it's important to acknowledge that over 120 bands of Native peoples are estimated to have occupied the Great Lakes Basin over the course of history to the present day, including the Chippewa, Potawatomi, Ojibwa, Ottawa, Mohawk, and many others. Most of us obviously know the sad history of the genocide and forced removal of these people from their homes. And while we cannot undo these tragedies, we can commit to doing better in the future. That's why when we first introduced the vision for Smart Great Lakes, we knew that the word smart could be interpreted in many different ways. And yes, there is a direct and obvious reference to smart technologies. But Smart Great Lakes is not limited to this interpretation alone. And I personally am inspired by the phrase work smarter, not harder. To me, this means, you do your research, you learn about different perspectives, approaches, and methodologies, and then you use what you've learned to identify strategies that are going to help you have the greatest impact and give you the best chance at success. And I want you guys to know that GLOS is committed to this holistic interpretation of SMART. We're educating ourselves and being inclusive of the wide range of perspectives that help us to be smarter stewards of the Great Lakes. And I think everyone who's been in the Smart Great Lakes initiative and helping ensure that this commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility is honored. So thanks to everyone here. Really, this meeting is a celebration of you and all of our partners. As we transition to the first panel, a logistics reminder. that to help facilitate the conversation, we're going to be using Slido for the chat Q&A. So hopefully you were able to scan that QR code. Those of you who are attending virtually can use Slido instead of the Zoom or YouTube chat. We have Shelby sitting somewhere who will be helping moderate the conversation for the virtual attendees. And you can upvote questions to come to the top for the question answer period. Those of you in person will be able to ask questions into a microphone, and we'll just have someone walking around if you raise your hand. And I already covered that SNEA is going to tell people when time's up, so that's good. Okay, so I'm going to ask that Josie come up. We're going to have the panelists just come up one at a time to present. And then when it's time for the Q&A, sit on the stage together. So come on up, Josie.
Thank you, Kelly. Good afternoon. I'm Josie Quintrell. As you already know, I'm the director of the IOOS Association. And as Kelly noted, I did grow up in Cleveland on Lake Erie, so it's always special for me to come to these Great Lake, these GLOS meetings. So I just want to point out that 50 years ago, the Cuyahoga River, which runs right down the middle of Cleveland, burned. And that really helped spurred on the passage of the Clean Water Act. And in the last 50 years, you know, we've made amazing strides. And there are no more huge dead fish along the Lake Erie, which I thought was just normal when I was growing up. But, you know, there's much more to accomplish as we go forward. There's a lot of threats happening to the Great Lakes, multiple stresses. Climate change is a driver of many of those. There's habitat loss, invasive species, pollution. I don't need to remind you, you drink the water from the Great Lakes, so it has, you know, significant implications, harmful algal blooms, and much more, and they all interact and weave, and it's a complex situation. So really, this is where I think the, you know, Smart Great Lakes initiatives comes in, is to harness our technology, our intelligence to really meet this problem head on. So I'm just, I think it was at a Great Lakes Observing System strategic plan session a few years ago that there was this spark of the idea of this initiative. And I just want to, you know, do a shout out to Kelly and her staff, because there's an old saying where you want to get something done fast, do it yourself. You want something to last, engage others. And I think that's one of the more smarter parts about this common strategy is I'm amazed what she said, that the staff didn't just write this, that people actually came to the table and did that. So this is an incredible collaborative effort, and it gives me great hope for the future. So, you know, it's enhancing monitoring. We really need that data. We need those high resolution data, the data management, the innovation and science, and providing that good source of information and policy so you can make informed decisions and management. So on this panel, we've got a few representatives of the, you know, 70 plus coalition members that have come together on the common strategy. And really we're asking them, you know, what is the vision? What is your vision? How do you see Smart Great Lakes Initiative moving us forward? I'm going to say that their bios are all in the agenda, so you can link to them. So I'm not going to read them because we actually want to hear from them. So I'm going to call up the first one, Dean, and I'm going to hopefully say your last name right, Alonistiotis. Close. Okay. So Dean is Chief of Staff for the Commissioner Kimberly Dublissett. I practiced these names, so my apologies, with the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. So please.
I don't have a slide presentation prepared because I figured it was easier for me to just express how important the collaboration amongst different local stakeholders, especially from a local governance perspective, which is the viewpoint that I bring. I remember our first conversation with Kelly and Katie about 2.5, 3 years ago when they were talking about Smart Great Lakes and really thinking about what that all entails and what that will mean for the region, but more importantly for an urban center like Chicago and Lake Michigan right outside that we see here. And I'm really enthused to see that it's all coming together and being able to realize the potential that all of us have in making a smart Great Lakes plan a reality, an opportunity for us all to collaborate and work together to achieve a common goal. Unfortunately, we have a common crisis in regards to climate change, and we know the challenges of climate change are only going to get worse by the next storm or the next rainfall, or the next drought that we experience. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you all for coming to Chicago. I hope you guys, unfortunately, I was joking to Katie earlier, we don't get good weather around here until June at the earliest. So it is quite gloomy and 40 degrees of a high today, but hopefully you guys will stick around this weekend when it's a high of 60 plus. So thank you for being here.
Thanks, Dean. So Alana, are you here? Yes, come on up. So Alaina is the executive director of Current, which is a nonprofit organization based here in Chicago, but has a global reach. And it's a water innovation hub. And I'm personally fascinated to learn more about it because it seems so intriguing. Anyways.
My slides are somewhere here. Oh, the one with my name. Maybe. And then is there a way to like see where we are? Okay. Perfect.
What? Sorry.
You're fine. You're fine. Awesome. Great. Hi, everyone. Alaina Harkness with Current, and also really happy to be a hometown Chicagoan, welcoming you all here to our great city, to our beautiful Great Lake, which I love even on 40-degree days. So actually, you know, I can't see, I guess it doesn't matter. So as Josie said, I lead Current. We're a water innovation hub headquartered right here in Chicago. And I'm really excited to talk about the work we've been able to do in partnerships. That quote about wanting something to endure and doing it with a lot of people, that really speaks to our mission and our values. So we were launched in 2016 with a lot of partners, including the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District here. And we have a three-part mission: collaborate to grow the inclusive blue economy, and it includes the new blue economy we heard about earlier, drive and accelerate adoption of innovative water technologies, and all to the end of solving the persistent water challenges that we face here in the Great Lakes, but also all around the world. So all of us here in this room share the common view that we all need more healthy water to drink, less flood water in our basements. Those are issues we face here in Chicago for sure, but they are very much common challenges. We also think there's big opportunity in meeting these challenges. So we want inclusive blue jobs that are putting Chicagoans to work here, and also homegrown companies invested by homegrown investors, solving water all around the world. So these are just some of the opportunities that we see. What will that take? So Current's problem statement is that in general, we're not rallying fast enough behind the ideas and technologies that will help protect our water resources, solve our water problems. And we think there's a few good reasons for that. Number one, innovation is really challenging in water. Sometimes it takes lots of different kinds of partnerships like those that are assembled here today. This is why GLOS and the Smart Great Lakes Initiative in particular are so important. You need all of these different government agencies, innovators, investors, all together working in lockstep to try to tackle these very important problems. And that kind of collaboration takes partnerships, and partnerships to endure take organizations that are purpose-built to sustain them. And that's what Current's job is, to try to help de-risk technology, bring it to market, and just set up the enduring partnerships that will help innovation come to ground faster. So we do that in a few key ways. We have a real search and scout function. So we're always trying to learn about the latest water technologies that are out there, but also the policies. It's really, we try to be really clear that innovation for Current is not only technology, but also the policies and partnerships that enable that technology to be deployed, and other kinds of solutions that can be in themselves innovative without technology at all. We then assess them. We try to help de-risk them. So I'll talk talk in a bit about one of our big projects where we're working with two very large public agencies to do something that neither of them would do alone, and try to help de-risk and prove out new technology that helps speed its time to market. And then we recommend those solutions to others. So we get lots of inbound queries from community groups that are seeking to address water challenges and want to know, like, what's the best way? How do we find that? So we try to serve as a clearinghouse to broker relationships between particular solutions and the people that have defined those problems. We have a water technology database. Some of the technologies in this room are already in it, and also a research site that helps our research universities and national labs in our region to connect with each other and build collaborative partnerships to tackle some of these interdisciplinary challenges. So, but we are more than a connector. So this is H2 Now Chicago. These are the technologies we're testing in the real world. Well, actually, yeah. Okay, so we have a pipeline of water innovation portfolio, like a pilot portfolio that we're looking at to meet emerging challenges. So sewage surveillance is one that's been really interesting and new. Since the pandemic happened, we've started to really take a deeper look at wastewater as a valuable public health monitoring tool. That's not just here in Chicago, that's a trend that's been happening around the country and around the world, but we've been really excited to partner with the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District and a consortium of research universities, actually, to help monitor our sewage for COVID-19 and serve as an early warning indicator. Pretty interesting. Pfas elimination, we are hearing lots and lots all the time about forever chemicals and how to manage them and the companies that are trying to do that. Lead detection and removal, you may know that Illinois has more lead service lines than any state in the country. So this massive infrastructure investment that's coming, we're really hopeful that we'll be able to find new and better ways to do that faster. But to H2 Now Chicago, so this is back to doing innovation in the real world. So this launched to the public in 2021, and we call it a weather app for the Chicago River, which is a huge simplification. What it actually is multiple tryptophan-like fluorescence, turbidity and temperature sensors in probes that are installed at 3 points along the river. So we are really excited, again, to be here at GLOS with the Smart Great Lakes Observing System, because we have a vision of all of our waterways in the city, the region, and the state being connected, delivering real-time information to the public that's actually actionable information that helps them make better decisions about recreation, about economic development. Our Chicago River, some of you may have walked along it in your approach to get here today. It's a recovering river. It's a recovering industrial river that has come a really long way thanks to the efforts of Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, massive investments over time, and others to ensure that this river quality goes up. But we know climate change is threatening that. And the more frequent rain events that we have, it changes the amount of stormwater going into the river, of water that's washing off of our concrete streets into the river, and we need to pay close attention to what's going on. So this QR code will take you to our H2 Now Chicago site, and you can see how we're doing this work in real time. But it would absolutely not be possible without very large partnerships with our public sector agencies, without looking around the world for innovative water technologies that we can actually, help to use and measure this. And then the work of a lot of developer partners to make a front end that's usable and accessible. So stay tuned for the launch. Second season will be live sometime late spring. And we're also really excited to be expanding this effort into other riverways in Chicago, and also adding new kinds of sensors to measure other things. So that's exciting. This is an example of the tryptophan gauges that we built last year. Again, you can see like the real simplification of trying to reach the public in ways that help them understand, today it might be high caution because we had a huge rain event, and you might want to steer clear of kayaking for a day or two, because we know that when there is combined sewer overflows into the river, that tryptophan and fecal coliform levels are higher than we might like on a kayaking day. But there's many days that it's good, and there's many days that it's perfectly fine to be out. And people in Chicago, those of us that grew up with the image of the Cuyahoga on fire, or Bubbly Creek, right, like leaching all of these like noxious industrial chemicals and decomposing all sorts of stuff, really bad vibes. People either think that the river is either much worse than it is or much better than it is. And the reality is like it's in the middle, and it's changing all the time. And so that's really that's the story we want to get out to the public. These are all the partners, back to the idea of a purpose-driven, partnership-driven project. Many, many different tech companies, research universities, our utilities that are part of making this happen. So that's the innovation work that we do. We really try to bring this technology into the real world, show people why it matters and why we need to care about water quality. But back to this inclusive blue economy vision, because that's really why Current is here. We have this economic development vision. And innovation is a really important and necessary piece of that fuel for the blue economy, but it's not sufficient. So our question is, what's it going to take to make Chicago and the Great Lakes the center of a thriving, inclusive, globally significant blue economy where we're really generating an outsized share of that 3 trillion expected market every year and also capturing it for the people that live here. 2030 is just a convenient target. So the building blocks here in Chicago, we have a ton of important building blocks. It's kind of a collection of assets approach. So it's not necessarily clear how these all connect, but we have our Great Lakes, we have rivers, we have corporate and government innovators, which is really exciting. The MWRD and DWM right here at Jardine, 2 of the largest facilities of their kind in the world. Great places to test technology. Lots of companies that touch on water. And when we talk about companies in the water space, we're talking about companies that demand water technology to meet their needs for better water quality or to reduce water consumption. So in Chicago, that's food and beverage, ag tech, advanced manufacturing, also data centers, right? There's lots of different companies that require technologies to manage water in their industrial uses. And on the supply side, we think about all of the innovators, the research universities, people that's cute. Does that mean time? Oh, 30 seconds. Cool. Okay. Who's the face? It's a great face. Like, who is that? I'd like to meet that person. Okay. Anyway, all the building blocks are not enough. We're working on a fact-based vision for what the plan should be. We have funding from the Department of Commerce, Region 5 EDA, to do an inclusive blue economy roadmap for the first time in Illinois. We're working with our partners actually in Wisconsin as well, because we know our regional strategy is really critical. So we'll be excited to launch that later this year, and it'll be mapping out what are the workforce strategies, entrepreneurship and investment strategies, export strategies that we need to deploy to help get us on the path to realizing our potential. Some of the pillars that we know we are going to build on, again, to reach into communities and make this more inclusive. We have education and jobs programs that are already underway, working on STEM education programs to reach youth that are really, can get excited about the river and then launch that into careers in, data science and engineering. So lots that I think, again, really relevant to the Smart Great Lakes platform. And I will just swing through this, and you can see more on our website at www.currentwater.org. So again, super happy to be here. Thank you to GLOS and the Smart Great Lakes Initiative for having us, and really, again, thrilled to welcome you all to Chicago. Look forward to the Q&A. Thanks.
Thank you. That was just a teaser, obviously, of a lot of what's going on. So from the hyper local here in the Chicago River, we're going to now transition to hearing from EPA. So we've got Todd Nettesheim. He's an environmental engineer. And I just kind of love this panel because it kind of spreads a lot of representation of the kinds of entities it takes to really make a difference in Great Lakes water. So turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't ask me how to do this one. What do we do?
I think I can do it. Find a cursor. Oh, there's a cursor. Just likes you.
There you go. Hit Control. What, David, what did you? That's for PDF.
Excellent. Well, thank you for having me. Kelly, thanks for the invitation. So I'm going to follow the instructions on my name tag, and I'm going to start with, so have you heard the one about the buoy and the seagull? Anyone? All right. So I'm Todd Nettesheim. I'm with EPA's Great Lakes National Program Office. We are a small non-regulatory office within EPA that's charged with protecting and restoring the Great Lakes. So in the instructions for presenting here, it was, experience in collaborative partnerships and how you use those collaborative partnerships to benefit from advancing technologies that will ultimately help either better understand, better manage, better use, or better conserve the Great Lakes. So I would say those two concepts are in the very fabric of everything that we do within the Great Lakes National Program Office. We can't accomplish anything that we do without collaborative partnerships, whether it's doing monitoring or science or research, or if it is restoration and protection activities. And the array of partners is incredibly large: federal agencies, state agencies, tribal governments and nations, local municipalities, NGOs, universities, industry, et cetera, et cetera. And then also that's only on the US side. We also have strong partnerships with the same collection of partners within Canada. In addition to that, we look to innovation in everything we do as well, whether that is doing restoration work, using the latest technology to remediate contaminated sediment from a site in Duluth, Minnesota, or it's using the most cutting edge research tools, either on our research vessel, the Lake Guardian, or using satellite imagery to better understand what's going on with chlorophyll concentrations in the Great Lakes. So I'm going to start with just a very brief background on sort of the governing structures and really the two primary missions that we have within Glencoe, and then I'll briefly touch upon a few examples of some of the technology that we are focusing on right now. So the first thing that we do is we implement the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. We are the chair of that, along with Environment and Climate Change Canada, representing the US and Canadian governments to restore and protect the Great Lakes. So we talked about earlier today, a few of the panelists talked about Cuyahoga River catching on fire. So April 15th, just about 2 weeks ago, was the 50th anniversary of the signing of the first Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. And it's really a landmark. It's not a treaty, it's just an agreement of two countries working together to protect and restore a shared watershed using an ecosystem approach. The second main thing that we do is we implement the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. So we heard from Congresswoman Dingell this morning, and we've been really blessed with incredible support. A lot of people here in the room today, a lot of people in DC, a lot of our elected officials across the Great Lakes, regardless of party lines, have a strong support for restoring and protecting the Great Lakes. So we've been, really fortunate to be provided with a great deal of resources to do that work. And again, we can't do this work alone. So the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative is a non-regulatory initiative to restore and protect the Great Lakes. We focus in on what we believe to be the priority issues within the Great Lakes, and that's remediating contaminated sediments within our areas of concern and restoring degraded habitat within those areas, controlling and preventing the new introductions and spread of invasive species, working on nutrient-related issues. How do we stop runoff from urban and agricultural areas that have water quality issues in the Great Lakes? Improving habitats for important species in the Great Lakes, and then also doing science monitoring, research, and education. So we also heard quite a bit today about IIJA. We refer to this in EPA commonly as BILL, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And 2 months ago, the president was in Lorain, Ohio, giving an announcement that the $1 billion that was appropriated to the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative will go towards, the bulk of that will go towards accelerating the cleanup of areas of concern. So not a lot of progress was made, from the original signing of the agreement in the 70s up until about 2010 in cleaning up those AOCs. We had only delisted one AOC on the US side. Since GLRI started, we've been able to delist 5 additional AOCs, with the most recent one being in Ashtabula.
And we also have 11 additional AOCs where we've completed what we believe to be all the management actions needed to clean up that area. And we are now just waiting for the ecosystem to recover. So the president announced very lofty goals that we will delist an additional 16 AOCs by 2030. So it's not just a random date. We chose that as well. And that would leave 9 AOCs. And of those 9, we will have 6 of those will have all those management actions complete as well. So these are very incredibly lofty, ambitious goals, but we view that the bill is a once in a generation opportunity to really make a dent in cleaning up these AOCs. So now I'll transition a little bit to the monitoring and science activities we do that probably has a greater connection to the Smart Great Lakes Initiative. So we operate 6 long-term monitoring programs in the Great Lakes, looking at water quality in the lower food web, coastal wetlands, dissolved oxygen in the central basin of Lake Erie. We look for contaminants in whole fish. We look for contaminants in the sediments and contaminants in the atmosphere as part of the integrated atmospheric deposition network. And each of these programs have evolved greatly over time. I think one of the best examples, and I see Tom here in the room, Tom Johangen, good to see you again, is looking for mussels, invasive mussels in the Great Lakes, where we started initially just doing, the standard ponar grabs. And just in my time in being with the Great Lakes National Program Office, we've evolved to attaching GoPro cameras onto ponars, to putting GoPros on a sled that's using the skis of an old Ski-Doo snowmobile to tow it along the bottom to look for imagery of mussels, to now really sophisticated equipment where we can do 3D imagery. So we are transitioning from not only just density of mussels, but trying to identify biomass and doing that visually through advanced technology. And each of these programs has a similar example like that. Another example is coastal wetlands. So coastal wetlands are just an incredibly important part of the Great Lakes. They serve as a filter for nutrients. They support habitats for important species in the Great Lakes. It's a resilience, as far as coastal resilience. They provide a buffer or a barrier to, storms in high or low water levels. There was, I think, once a million acres of coastal wetlands in the Great Lakes, and now we're only about half of that. So it's really important that we understand what we have and how we can protect, enhance, and restore that. So this program, which started in 2010, is just generating an incredible amount of data. And we have strong partnerships with many universities, federal agencies, and even consulting partners as well. And we need to use that data to make informed decisions. So they've developed a decision support tool that's helping us select, identify, and target projects for coastal wetland restoration and protection. Then I'll just really close quickly on some of the other cross-cutting issues that we are focusing on under the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. So coastal resiliency, a very, very large priority within the current administration, along with environmental justice, and inclusivity has been covered quite a bit this morning with our early panelists. I won't get into that right now in my speech, but happy to address any questions related to that. But we're working closely with many federal agencies to try and better understand what are those future potential stresses to the coastlines and the nearshore habitats of the Great Lakes. And I just want to keep going so I can see the photo. All right, excellent, thank you. So we're hoping to have a tool and information ready in about 3 years or so that is going to have those informed new wave heights, wave energy, precipitation levels, temperature, that's going to help really inform restoration activities. And then we're working collaboratively with partners, USGS, NOAA, many others to map and understand the drivers of cladophora, harmful algal blooms, and hypoxia, using satellite imagery, using in situ sensors, and many other things that relate very closely to the Smart Great Lakes Initiative. And with that, I will close. So thank you.
Okay, now we're going to switch to our remote participants who are coming to us from across the border in Canada.
Are you gonna help me close it?
Takes a village.
I know.
We're gonna have her on that little TV down there.
So is she on there? So anyways, we're going to hear from, is she on or Mary Claire? Okay. Bear with us while we transition. I'm very impressed on how to do these hybrid in-person virtual meetings. I think it's going to happen more and more, and which does allow us to participate, but there's always little technical problems. So the next two speakers and is Mary Claire Buell. She's with the Collective Environmental Group, and she's been doing a lot of work on the Indigenous Smart Great Lakes Initiative. She's been surveying a lot of the tribes and Indigenous nations to assess how they are interested, how we can blend their level of their appreciation and understanding of the Great Lakes with sort of our Western approach. And so we'll be hearing from her, and then we'll also hear from Dave Burden, who's on the International Joint Commission. In the meantime, do we have any questions for some of the panelists who've gone before? Yeah, so I thought maybe we'll, yeah, go ahead. You use your mic. Here, you want to use this one? Obviously not a rock star.
Hello. What I thought was interesting also is that this week they're celebrating Water Week in Washington, D.C. So they're doing a fly-in in Washington. And it's interesting that it's going to take a whole lot of local support, state support, and federal support, especially as we see significant amount of infrastructure dollars that are coming through the pipeline over the next several years. And we have had exceptional reception, at least from the Illinois congressional delegation, about the desire to do more infrastructure dollars, and in particular, not only on lead service pipe replacements that Chicago is the leading, unfortunately, the leading city in the country, but also flood mitigation and stormwater management. So it's exciting that we're coincidentally GLOS during Water Week.
Great. How are we doing, David? Almost there. So I had one question for the panel, which is I'm very interested in low cost developments, because that seems to be one of our biggest challenges. To get quality data, it often is just very expensive. I mean, it's great data, but are we making any headways in reducing the cost? So I don't know if anybody wants to answer that or have a perspective on that. Oh, we've got a question.
When you're done with your question.
Okay. Oops, go ahead.
Yeah, just a question for everyone in the room, I guess. But on the current side, I was curious also, how are you measuring and quantifying inclusivity when you're building apps? It's a noble goal, but I don't think we've nailed it yet.
Why don't you come up here?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do know a lot about the demographics of representation in the current economy that we have. So we know when you talk about inclusion, we're talking about everything from race, gender, socioeconomic characteristics of our labor force. So we're pulling in labor data, but we're also thinking about what the long-term wealth building opportunities are for those jobs, like what are good quality jobs in these sectors. So those are two of the ways we're thinking about it. The third dimension is around spatial representation. So where people are coming from to get jobs and how they get to those jobs. And again, we have good data about where people are coming from now and also where jobs are most needed. And so we're trying to be really intentional when there are industries looking, this is just an example, but industries looking for to relocate to Chicago because of the relative access to this water. That's great. How do we think about citing those industry moves in places that are also highly proximate to people that can get to those jobs on public transportation, communities of color that need jobs? What are the pathways? This is the most important part in my mind of actually like achieving these goals long term. How do you reach students and expose them to the idea that they could work in all of these water related careers, which right now, we found that our public school curriculum does not include any water focused curriculum. If it happens, it's enrichment. So we've been working with our public school system to change that. How do you get exposed upstream? But then how do you also have 2-year degrees, certifications, 4-year degree programs, advanced degree programs, and just understand the whole array of options that are available, because these aren't only technical careers. There's labor jobs that are very important in this space. And anyway, so it's a long question, but I think the short answer is there are important and measurable benchmarks now, and we want to figure out what the reasonable goals are 5 years, 10 years. How do we move the needle? So yeah, great question.
Thank you. So now we're going to do a sound check. I think we're all set.
Hey, Mary Claire, can you come off mute and see if we can hear you?
Yeah, hello everyone.
I think so. Can you say that once more?
Yay, hello.
All right, welcome. I'm going to pull up your slides,
Thank you.
give you the mic.
Should I begin while you're pulling up the slides? Yeah.
Yeah, feel free.
Okay, awesome. So I just kind of wanted to give a little background on who I am. I'm calling in from Nogojawan or Peterborough, Ontario, which is not too far away from Toronto in the Mississauga and Anishinaabe territory. So definitely within the Great Lakes watershed. Myself, I identify as settler Canadian with Italian, Irish, and German ancestry. So the perspectives I bring to you come through that worldview. I'm a trained ecotoxicologist, but in 2018, I founded a company called Collective Environmental Consulting, and we predominantly work in collaboration with Indigenous communities, bringing Indigenous systems of knowledge and Western science together to tackle environmental issues that are impacting these communities. So when Kelly reached out saying, I guess another hat I should mention, I'm an adjunct faculty with Trent University, and I teach for the Wenjack School of Indigenous Studies. But the hat I wanted to talk about most today is my role on the SGLI, or Smart Great Lakes Initiative, common strategy. So I sat with Dean as the Canadian co-chair for the policy and management issue area team. And now I'm sitting on the leadership team. But when Dean and I were with our group and really thinking about the Smart Great Lakes Initiative, we felt like we wanted to advocate for environmental justice to be built into this plan and initiative, and also inclusivity. And then, with my background and also other team members brought up, we have no Indigenous voices on our teams. And, how do we make sure that the Smart Great Lakes Initiative is inclusive in an equitable way, that priorities that Indigenous communities might have are actually, equitably considered and included in this initiative. And so it's kind of funny, David, if you don't mind going to the next slide, we as as part of this initiative, the International Joint Commission, as Canadians and Americans, we work really hard. We put a lot of tax dollars into honoring our treaty between Canada and US. But we have to, as a collective, understand that there are many, many more nations that we have a responsibility to honor our treaties with as well. So here's some treaty maps and sort of land maps associated with the Great Lakes, indigenous communities, nations, and tribes. And so even coming down to the Smart Great Lakes Initiative, how do we do that responsibly without running the risk of tokenism or bringing in indigenous voices, but then diluting those priorities and perspectives with the mass sort of settler or Western worldview perspectives that currently sit in the powerful positions on these committees. And so this we sort of brought forward to the Smart Great Lakes leadership team, and that sort of got brought forward to the advisory team, and everyone agreed that it would be really important for us to find a way to hold up that responsibility and to have an inclusive approach where we're providing equal, equitable opportunity for Indigenous voices to influence this initiative. And so I guess we could go to the next slide. One framework that I think is a really helpful visual, and it actually pulls off of a treaty in the Great Lakes Basin. It's an old treaty, still stands today, but it's the two-row wampum belt. And so this is one of the original treaties between the Haudenosaunee people and the Dutch. And it represents the two blue stripes are the Dutch in their ship, and the Haudenosaunee in their canoe, and they're going down the river of life, and they're coexisting peacefully and sharing land and resources, and sort of these three rows of white beads in between the two blue lines represent peace, friendship, and mutual respect. So while we get to steer our own vessel and go through, in terms of, acknowledging our interactions with the Great Lakes and our reliance on it, we can do that independently, yet we'll move forward together with peace, friendship, and mutual respect. And from time to time, we'll need to have our vessels sort of convene and really make sure that we're not impacting one another's way of life in a negative way, and promoting well-being for future generations of all those using that space. And so if we could take that as a model for how we might be able to think about our Smart Great Lakes initiative, we thought, what if we had a parallel initiative that really allowed for Indigenous voices to formulate, a common strategy for themselves, and then we could work together to make sure that our priorities in this original document and the parallel document, can complement each other and support each other and don't sort of create barriers for one another. So that came forward, and of course I can't be a voice for Indigenous people, but I did reach out to my colleagues at the Wenjack School and the Indigenous Environmental Studies program. I said, hey, is there any appetite for helping see if this is something we can make happen? And so Barbara Wall, she's a Potawatomi scholar and faculty at Trent University, as well as Dr. Chris Fergal, who's the co-director of the Indigenous Environmental Studies program. They together run the Indigenous Environmental Institute at Trent University, and said, before we even launch into this, we need to see if this is something Indigenous communities and nations, tribes and organizations even want. So if we can go to the next slide. So we proposed a project that's called Towards an Indigenous-led Smart Great Lakes Initiative. And that's where we're sitting right now. GLOS is funding this project for us to explore. So it's Chris and Barb are the co-leads. I'm supporting the project, and we have a diverse team of researchers that are working towards scoping out, what's being done in the Great Lakes by Indigenous-led organizations and nations and tribes, but also running interviews with these different organizations and nations so that we can gauge if there's an appetite or an interest or a need for such a sort of parallel project. And so we're at the stage right now where we're moving towards interviews. And it's really interesting because it really takes a collaborative effort to even approach this, as we try to make decisions like who are we reaching out to, and how do we formulate these interviews, and where do we draw the boundaries of what's Great Lakes and what isn't. And we realized we needed an advisory team. So we reached out to different Indigenous representatives and scholars around the Great Lakes to be our sounding board for making those micro decisions, but those have high impacts on inclusion and exclusion, and even who has a voice at even this potential table that we're hoping to form. So that initiative is well underway, and we're really hopeful that positive outcomes come from that. I wanted to kind of sidestep because I think that this is kind of tightly linked, but also another project. So through the Smart Great Lakes mini grant opportunity, my company and 2 Indigenous nations on Lake Huron, Georgian Bay. So you can go to the next slide, David, thanks. We launched a project called Bomage, and this project that's an Anishinaabe word. It loosely translates to track or follow along. And this project is about investigating the lake whitefish declines and their interactions with spawning shoals. It's in partnership with Chippewas of Neashingaming and Chippewas of Saugeen, who together form the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. And they operate the largest Indigenous run commercial fishery on the Canadian side of the Great Lakes. And their people, the wealth of knowledge within those communities have noticed massive drastic changes in shoal habitat. And so working with their knowledge base, as well as technology like ROV and telemetry, we're investigating lake whitefish and spawning shoal interactions in hopes of coming up with recommendations around how to protect those shoals or rehabilitate them, and hopefully support the well-being of lake whitefish, as well as the people of Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. And so through this and through their networks, other nations have reached out and said, hey, we would love to do that. This whole project is built around capacity building. I often joke that I often, on projects, I'm working myself out of a job, because when we finish, that knowledge and that expertise, I hope stays within the community if we've done our job right. And then they can, do this again in other places, or expand it without needing too much outsider support. And, with all these other nations engaging the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, and, it really makes me think this, if the Smart Great Lakes, if it's deemed initiative, this Indigenous-led Smart Great Lakes initiative is deemed important and valuable from our sort of preliminary scan of where people's priorities are at, and if that's important to them, then that could be a hub for connecting other nations with these opportunities, like funding and researchers that know how to respect Indigenous ecological knowledge and work with that and Western science towards a common goal. So I spoke really fast. I don't even know my time because I don't get to see the funny picture that everyone's talking about, but I just wanted to sort of give a little background on my involvement and a few of the projects that GLOS has been so supportive of in getting launched, and happy to take questions or whatever comes next. Thank you.
Mary Claire. That was fascinating. I hope you can stick around. We have one more speaker, and then we'll have time for questions and answers. but I find this whole approach just I'm going to talk a little bit because I think Dave is coming up to do the switch. But what is the feedback you're getting from your conversations with some of the tribes about their interest in Smart Great Lakes?
To be honest, we're really just starting that. So I don't have an answer for you yet, but within the next month, we'll have some preliminary results where we can sort of, I mean, from my own contacts, so sort of outside of, formally that initiative, there is interest. But how that manifests on the sort of bigger scale, we'll yet to find out, I suppose.
And Dave, can we do a quick sound check for you?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. How am I coming through?
Whoops. So welcome, Dave. We're really glad you can join us here. Dave Burden is with the International Joint Commission, and I think I'll just turn it over to you, and please introduce yourself a little bit more. Thank you.
Thanks, Josie. So you can hear me fine? Can you hear me, folks?
Do what?
Okay, I'm seeing in the chat that you can hear me, so I'm just going to start off because I know we're running short on time. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really sorry I couldn't be there in person. I was in Belgium last week and attending an invasive species conference, and it seems that I picked up an invasive virus called COVID. So I'm sure you're happy that I'm where I am today. I just wanted to provide a little bit of background and context to start off. So Dave, if you could put up slide 2, please. As Todd mentioned, this is the month that we're marking the 50th anniversary of the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. And clearly we've made tremendous progress over the past 50 years. And as Josie and Alaina have mentioned, we're not seeing the fires on the water anymore. As Todd mentioned, we've done a lot of work to clean up areas of concern, but there's a lot more work required. And, from a legacy perspective, there is a lot of work to be done, but there's also a bunch of challenges that are impacting the lake that we've created more recently. And, others have spoken about the challenge of aquatic invasive species and the fact that, let's think about it, in the 1990s, we weren't talking about mussels, but here we are, in the 2000s, and they've become established and they've spread across all of the basin, and they've completely changed the ecosystem. There's new, tougher challenges that lie ahead, and with the growing impacts of climate change, our current approach to monitoring and documenting the Great Lakes, it's just not sufficient. Over the next few years, there's going to be significant decisions that will be made to rebuild and recover our economies. The auto sector that we're going to see in the next 10 to 15 years will be completely different from what we're seeing in the sector today. So we need to ensure that the investment decisions that are being made are based on sound science to address the life cycle implications of the rare earth metals and the resins and the other elements that will be part of the next technological chapter of our economy. We just don't want to repeat those sins that we've made in the past. If we put up slide 3, we really need to know what's going on in the lakes and how climate change and other factors are impacting and altering the environment. We can't restore and protect the lakes unless we understand what's going on. And frankly, we are blind 3 to 4 months of the year because there's not really much winter science being done in the Great Lakes Basin. If we turn to slide 4, I want to talk a little bit about the Great Lakes Science Strategy and why we need it now. And this science is needed to address and inform us on 2 fundamental questions. The first one, what will the future bring? And the second, and equally as important, is how are we going to respond to that? The Great Lakes Science Research, Monitoring, and Surveillance programs of the governments of Canada and the United States, they've been in place for 20-odd years, and there's not been a real fundamental review or reinvestments in those programs over that period of time. And as I think we all can agree, in many instances, the ecosystem today bears little resemblance of what it was 20 years ago. We can move to slide 5, please. So the IJC, through our science boards and collaboration with others, including the U.S. Geological Survey, Great Lakes Observing System, National Association of Marine Labs, and many others, we've been working to advance a science strategy for the Great Lakes. And while this work is not yet complete, the concept envisions a decadal scale science strategy that will help fill priority science gaps and needs, effectively help us to forecast change, mitigate impacts, and restore and preserve the Great Lakes ecosystem. If we can go to slide 6. Our initiative is modeled on similar work developed for the oceans, as you see here, as well as the Great Lake Restoration Initiative. And also, we've been heavily involved in support of the work that U.S. Geological Survey colleagues did in responding back to a congressional request for information relative to the science needs and gaps in the Great Lakes. All of this work indicates that a science strategy is critical, not just for the ecosystem, but also for our economy, jobs, and human health. If we could move to slide 7, please. The science strategy has been developed and supported by many of you in the room today and your organizations. We held surveys and workshops, and we've been documented all of this stuff in a contractor's report, and we're now writing up our summary of report and recommendations for our commissioners. The project analyzed existing science investment in the US and Canada across all sectors, including government, universities, and non-government organizations. Although annual expenditures of the Great Lakes research and monitoring to support effective management approach probably about $250 million US dollars, investments in research vessels, scientific engineering staff, research infrastructure, and equipment, they just have not kept up with the needs of this region or the rapid advances in technology. That $250 million investment is only a tiny fraction of 1% of the Great Lakes regional economy. And as others have said earlier in the day, we really need to collaborate and partner on getting the message out. So the importance of the science research and monitoring needs of the Great Lakes are understood by decision makers. We're currently working out our estimate of the resources needed to implement the science needs, but preliminary analysis suggests that will be an increase of about 1/3 of existing investment levels. And one thing is crystal clear to me. If we're going to be successful, it will require us to gather, build, and maintain and share big data in an integrated and collaborative way that is currently foreign to us. If we go to slide 8, David, I want to talk a little bit about the why. I touched on it, but I think it's critically important because we're seeing very different environmental and weather phenomena, and we don't know what we don't know, because essentially we just lack the intelligence and the basic information to make informed decisions or recommendations to decision makers. Addressing this lack of data and modeling so we can better advise and inform decision makers must be made a top priority. How can we expect to be able to make informed decisions on the lakes if we're blind to what's going on for 4 months of the year? We can move to slide 9. So where are we? As I said, we haven't finished the report. We're in the final drafting, but I think there's it's safe for me to say there's 4 priority themes which we feel will require additional investment and review. The first, obviously, research and monitoring, including the people to advance the work, and included in that, I have to include winter limnology. The second pillar would be assets, platforms, and technology to support the research and monitoring. And then a third pillar would be centers of expertise. And the fourth is, and I'm not just saying this because of the audience, but it came clear in all our workshops and our surveys, is promote and advance the power of big data. Taken together, these 4 priorities will provide the essential tools for guiding science-based investment decisions to protect the lakes, the ecology, and grow our regional economy. If we could flip to slide 10. I mentioned about what's going on in the lakes in the winter. We really need to understand what's going on. As more and more so this becomes important with the advent and the impacts we're seeing from weather events and the variability of our weather events as a result of climate change. We have arguably a significantly important fishery in the Great Lakes Basin, and the decisions that are being made are impacting that significantly. We want to have improved management of shipping and shorelines related to ice formation and breakup. And there's lots of other concerns that in the interest of time, I guess we should probably just move on. The science strategy envisions improvements in core monitoring, instrumentation, and data management systems to put the power of big data and the full weight of emerging technologies towards improved scientific understanding that can directly contribute to more effective management and policy decision-making. So just to wrap up with the last slide there, Dave, I think Great Lakes research institutions are experiencing a wave of retirements that's draining investment in skills and expertise that have been developed over decades. Filling these retirements and augmenting the scientific expertise in the Great Lakes with new scientists, new engineers across the region will reduce the impact of this demographic transition and allow us to embrace new ideas and approaches and inject new life into our agencies and institutions. The strategy will consider our data needs and gaps along with centers of expertise to facilitate collaboration across the borders, across discipline, across the region, and across institutions. Responding to these gaps is pivotal to our economic and social futures and the ecological health of the lakes. And I think in the interest of time, I'll just stop it there. So thank you, and hopefully we can have a few minutes for discussion.
Thank you so much. Yes. So unfortunately, I don't think we have time for questions at this point. We have overrun our time, but why don't you join me in thanking our panelists, because it was an amazing suite of discussion. So thank you so much. And I encourage you, I'm sorry that we can't virtually have coffee with the two people on the screens, but I encourage you to catch up with people here and ask them your follow-up questions. So thank you so much.
So we're going to go ahead and take a break now and reconvene at 2 o'clock. It's going to have to be a short break because we're running over time. Thanks, guys. See you back here at 2. And we got together with a consortium group, so other great glider operators, and try to have missions happening all at the same time. I'm particularly interested in this project and using the data to estimate whole ecosystem metabolism. So this is a term that includes gross primary production, which is a measure of the rate of carbon dioxide that is being converted to oxygen through photosynthesis, and ecosystem respiration, which is the rate that oxygen is converted to carbon dioxide through both heterotrophic and autotrophic respiration. And so metabolism is complicated because of the stratification and because of the light and the vertical and the spatial. And so just as in the previous graph, we had to do some funky calculations and assign data values to whether they were respiration or photosynthesis. Methods to calculate metabolism from glider data is something we have been working on for a few months now. And so
associated with spatial and temporal aspects of metabolism against the backdrop of data collected by a moving glider. This is also a preliminary result, and we'll have the full results ready for the DASM meeting and a talk recorded for those of you who are interested. I'm happy to share. To give you a little bit of taste, the map here shows a fly path. So sticking to your notes does not work. For those of you who are wondering, for a 17-day glider mission in Lake Ontario. This is in Lake Superior, but we thought we would try with Lake Ontario data before we did the real deal. And so for this mission, we calculated primary production and respiration. That's what you see in the bar graphs for the entire period. And then against that, we put data that was collected using traditional methods. So, bottle incubations and field work, or even buoys. And we're so pleased to see that it matches. So this to us means that using the gliders to calculate metabolism will work. And so clearly there's still a lot of work to do, and gliders are increasingly being used in the Great Lakes to better understand variation in ecosystem conditions. And as you can see from the map here are some of the fly paths that have occurred in the Great Lakes in the past 10 years. And we've gotten together, so our Rayon's pilot, Kaylin Burmaster, who's here, if you want to ask her some questions, she gets us together. She has gotten the group together, and we have formed the Consortium of Great Lake Gliders. And this is a group where, because it's not an insignificant thing to operate these things, this is a group that supports and helps each other. And we're really glad to be part of that. And of course, as I just said, it's not an insignificant thing. And so we have a lot of partners to thank for the program. And thank you so much for your attention. Any questions? So the question is, how close can we get to the bottom? And my understanding is we can get pretty close to the bottom. Obviously can't really touch the bottom. And there are certain types of glider missions where we can hover. So most commonly used are the ones that oscillate up and down, but we can also hover over a certain area. This uses the battery then. And so then the missions are shorter. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Well, in recent years, we have seen important changes and advancements in the design of buoys. Todd Miller is going to be talking to us about his and his team's work to develop a smart and cost-effective buoy called the Panther Buoy. I think if Josie is in the audience, the question that she asked earlier regarding developing more affordable technologies, Todd might have an answer here with the Panther Buoy. And before I leave, I will introduce Todd. Todd is currently an associate professor in the School of Public Health at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and the director of the Laboratory for Aquatic Microbiology and Environmental Chemistry. He received the Bachelor's of Science from St. Norbert College in Green Bay, Wisconsin. He received a doctorate in Marine Estuary Environmental Science with a specialization in marine biotechnology from the University of Maryland, College Park in 2004. Following graduate school, Todd spent 3 years as a postdoctoral scholar at the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, studying environmental chemistry of pharmaceuticals and personal care products. He then spent 4 years as a research associate at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, studying cyanobacterial hubs. Todd's current research is directed at understanding environmental drivers of hubs using advanced aquatic technology tools, including those developed in his own laboratory.
I should be able to.
Yes, I know how to use computers, I think. I'm not an engineer though, as Anna pointed out. So thank you, Anna. And thank you, GLOS, for having me here. So I'm a microbiologist and my lab mainly studies harmful algal blooms. And we use data buoys quite a bit for studying harmful algal blooms. I know many people here do that too, and they're very good at that one location for detecting harmful algal blooms. But as was just mentioned, buoy observations are not always where you need them, right? So I think it was maybe June last year, somebody from the remote sensing community sent me this satellite image of Lake Winnebago that we study quite a bit. And we have a buoy on Lake Winnebago. He said, hey, there's a bloom going on in your lake. And I said, oh, cool, okay, check it out. Let's go check the buoy data. No sign of a bloom. Well, why is that? Because our buoy's here and the bloom's not there. So sure, maybe the bloom's gonna move over past the sensors eventually and we'll see it. But we started thinking, well, you know, blooms tend to form down there in the southeast corner. We should probably put a buoy down there. And I thought, well, there's a swimming beach up there. We should probably put a buoy there too. And I thought, there's drinking water intakes, several of them on this lake. We should have buoys over those drinking water intakes. And then there's a swimming hole down here that's pretty popular. So we should have a buoy there too, right? So how are we going to do that? These buoys cost $30,000 to $50,000. They take extreme amount of time and expertise to put them together. So we started an experiment to think about how could we build a simple, cost-effective data buoy system for the Great Lakes that we call the Panther Buoy. And we had a simple goal, which was to have a system that just read a defined set of sensors, save the data to an onboard storage drive, and send that data to an online open source database like Seagull. But we had some properties of the system that we wanted to keep in mind, which the first one was that we wanted to be fully integrated. I didn't want to get a solar power regulator from here, a modem from over here. We wanted to build the thing from the ground up with everything included. We also only wanted to include required functions. So we didn't have a bunch of things that weren't necessarily needed. We wanted to build a data logger that only read the sensors we needed and wasn't available as a sort of Swiss Army knife, and no Bluetooth, for gosh sakes, no Bluetooth. And then finally, we wanted the system to be open, programmable, and ready, meaning that if you wanted to, you could use an open source programming language to change what it was doing. But at the same time, we had a script ready to go that you just load it and it would just turn it on and it starts sending data. So we started a long process of R&D. We fruit data logger running a SAM21 microprocessor. We prototyped hundreds of different designs. You can see all the circuit boards that we made, probably thousands of them. Circuit boards were designed in Eagle and EDA, and then prototyped with a company in China. Yeah, that's tough. So in the interest of being open source, we've loaded all the designs and the software to our GitHub library. So currently, this is our current design. We have a 2-board design with a motherboard, still using the Adafruit Adalogger microprocessor breakout board, in part because we thought, well, if you wanted to change to a different microprocessor, you could do that by just swapping this one out. And there's lots of breakout boards now that fit the Feather format, so possible to do that. The board basically provides all the functions you need to read a number of different sensors, common sensors that people use, including full data sons. We have a number of different switchable power ports to save power. It has a GPS, an inertial measurement unit to get buoy, roll, pitch, and heading. Headings used to correct wind direction. Of course, the onboard storage drive, and we have a hardware watchdog that will reset the Feather microprocessor should the system hang. In terms of buoy platforms, we've built our own using a Gouldman float and some PVC, but we really like the Fondrius CB150 buoy. It's affordable and really rugged. And so you can see a fully outfitted buoy here on the left, the electronics that are loaded into an enclosure. And then we make our own lid for the dry well to go onto. That's just machined with in partnership with a local machine shop. For power, we have 3 3.7 volt, 6600 milliamp hour lithium ion batteries. That's that blue pack you see there. So it's about that big. For the solar charger, we make a PCB with actually 3 different solar charging chips on it. Each of those chips is sensing the solar radiation coming to each panel individually. So if the buoy is turned one way, one panel is getting less light than the other side of the panel. So it's a little more efficient that way. You can see the power draw there, but I mean, we're looking at about 2 weeks with no solar charging at all on one charge. But of course, we're counting on getting some solar charging every day. We also developed a low-cost temperature chain. We want to build our own sensors as well. So far, this is the main thing that we've built in terms of sensors. They're just digital temperature sensors that are potted in 2-part epoxy around a rugged cable. And we've done some lab tests comparing to, an in situ aquatrol or a YSI sonde. And I don't have a whole lot of time to talk about all that, but it matches pretty well to those systems. So first deployment was in Green Bay, and here's the data. We've got phycocyan and chlorophyll provided by Turner fluorometers. We have the buoy roll and pitch, and then on the bottom is our temp chain data. And you see we get an increase in phycocyanin, which occurs under conditions that are pretty typical of blooms, where you see based on our roll and pitch of the buoy, things get pretty calm. And you can see down there around June 9th, we have a really high level of stratification and water temperatures getting to almost 30 degrees. So perfect conditions for microcystis bloom. We do spit out a bloom detector, which is just based on increases in the fluorometer signal above a baseline. That's what that bloom detector is up there. We then move the buoy to Lake Superior and get much lower fluorescence values, which we're counting on the Big Blue Lake. But of course, there have been algal blooms in this area, so we're interested in kind of trying to hunt those down. We did have an incident on Lake Superior. It's a lot rougher, obviously, where the buoy tipped over. So the arrows are here. We had a partnership with the National Park Service, and they went out and certainly saw the buoys tipped over. They tipped it back over for us, and it started running again. But we did go out and put a more ballast weight on the bottom, and then put it back out. And for the remainder of the year, we didn't have any more issues. So this year, more Panther buoys going out. We've got one already in Sturgeon Bay and one in Nicolet Bay, and you can see the sensors we have there. Most of those are commercial sensors, except for the temp chain. We're putting some more out in Lake Winnebago, as well as one out in Lake Michigan and Algoma, and of course, our Superior buoy. We also put those Gillman float buoys out in local lagoons in Milwaukee, one in Discovery World that monitors water temperature for the USA Triathlon. For future work, we really like partnering with GLOS because we want to get the word out about this. We want to work with other organizations, see who wants it and who wants to put them out themselves. We can't be putting all these out ourselves. We want to really, expand the map of where observations are. We also need to optimize the procedures. We really want to just order the stuff that we need to click these things together and quickly get them out. Currently, it costs us about $10,000 to make one system, the systems that I showed you here. We think if we can get the labor costs down and we can get some more of our sensors made, we'll reduce those costs as well. The CB150 buoy itself is about $4,000. We do have some other sensors in beta testing. We have a chlorophyll fluorometer, phycocyanin fluorometer, a PAR sensor, turbidity sensor, a pH sensor, and a wiper, all in development right now. And yeah, I guess we can add Bluetooth. Thanks. So just some acknowledgements, my two partners in crime, Jeff Noose and Wilson Tarpey, who are here today. And then we work closely with the UWM Prototyping Center to machine some of the things that we can't do ourselves. And then these are some of the partners that we have that have funded us to put buoys out, most especially GLOS, of course. So happy to take questions.
That's really cool. It's not real time though, right? You don't have a cellular hookup.
Yeah, it is. It's all real time.
It is all real time.
Yeah, there's an embedded cellular modem. We're using a Cat4 LTE modem provided by Skywire or Nimblelink, which is now AirGain. Yep.
Todd. All right. David, I think we're gonna need to get Michael up and running. Not sure where David is. Our next speaker is actually couldn't make it. Oh, there is David. So, all right, there you are. So it's just me, right? So let me get this up then. 3 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's lost.
You hear us?
Can you hear me?
Thank you.
Great.
Presentations. Michael Twiss will be talking to us about the expansion of the River Environmental and Sensor Observation Network project to serve Akwesasne in the St. Lawrence River. Michael Twiss is currently professor and chair of the Department of Biology at Clarkson University in New York. His expertise is Great Lakes St. Lawrence River system limnology, and his research focuses on water quality. Over the past decade, he has increasingly become involved with Great Lakes science policy, advising where he shares expertise at both, I apologize. Let me try that again. Over the past decade, he has increasingly become involved with Great Lakes science policy advising, where he shares expertise at both international and national levels. He's an appointed member of the Great Lakes Science Advisory Board of the IJC since 2014, and helped GLOS and others in the Great Lakes community develop the Smart Great Lakes Initiative strategy. He has served as the president of the International Association for Great Lakes Research. And for those of you that don't know, he's an avid hockey fan, has refereed just this past hockey season over 135 games. So that's quite something. And with that, Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Anna. And believe me, I tried my hardest to get there. I had flights and everything, but it just didn't work trying to get there from here, unfortunately. And so where am I? I'm in traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, specifically the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation, which is referred to as the Mohawk. And so I'm just south of the St. Lawrence River here. And I recognize a lot of the environmental injustices that have occurred in this community and others across North America. And where I grew up in Northern Ontario, I was a bit more oblivious to it when I was a child. But now I recognize this kind of impact that it's had. And so what I do is I work with these communities. And when I do, I collaborate in a way that's consistent with Giswantha, which you heard Mary Claude Buell mention earlier. And so if you could have this first slide, please. Right, so this is called REASON, and it's the River Environment and Sensor Observation Network. And we are based now in the St. Lawrence River. We have designs to do this in all the connecting waters across the Great Lakes. And so here are some fun facts on the St. Lawrence River. And what's really important to recognize, so as you look out here, this is looking west into Lake Ontario, around the Thousand Islands region. What you need to recognize is that these waters across the Great Lakes environment are important intersections in our communities. And so they're intersections for both biota and also for people as well. This river is a large river, and it's been impounded since 1958, and we're using that to our advantage right now, in a sense. And there have been floods just recently in 2017 and 2019. Next slide, please. So most large rivers that are defined as those which intimidate researchers, so the St. Lawrence definitely qualifies as one of those. They're not studied that much. and even less for long durations. You can see this image on the left-hand side, and it shows the duration. So at the very top there, you've got hundreds and thousands of months. It's a log scale. And on the bottom section, you've got the experimental area. And so large rivers, large area, long-term studies, very few. And so we wanted to actually start doing that to address this gap of our knowledge. And why do we need this knowledge? Well, as you can see over on the right-hand side, Dave Burden from the International Joint Commission mentioned this, one of these projects earlier. And this is an IGC project called the Great Lakes Early Warning System. And so just like how do you manage an environment, or how do you understand your relationship with it if you're not making measurements and observations, so too is the need to be doing this on a wide scale. And so what we need to do is understand these rivers 365 days a year. And so how do you actually do that? Next slide, please. So to give you some background here, these are some of the issues that are facing the upper St. Lawrence River. And so I mentioned water levels. There's a motion to, well, there's a plan in effect right now to regulate the water levels to bring back more biodiversity. But we're finding out that it's also affecting things like water quality. And so a lot of these issues here are those which are thematic across the Great Lakes. Next slide, please. So already today, you've heard a number of different ways to make observations. Gliders, buoys, satellites. Rivers are different. They're not lakes, obviously. And so how do you actually make some measurements like this? And so there's a couple ways we can do it. There's 3 ways we've done it so far. And one of them is to do these transverse channel transects, where you put your instruments in a boat and you do in-hull sampling, and you go across and you do geo-referenced positioning, time-stamped data collection. You've got your course that you've won upon, and then afterwards you can reconstruct what the water looked like in these different masses. You can also go, as in number B here, go down the river, or go up the river is what we do. And again, you're just taking these data from these discrete points. But you get this long, sort of very wide sort of spatial scale. The problem with this, though, is that it takes a lot of time, and it's just a snapshot of, say, a day or 3 days, or however long you're able to invest. The third technique is more like in line with what you see with a buoy. And so it's a fixed location, and you just measure the water around you if you're in a lake, and the water moves around. Whereas in a river that's coming down towards the sensor location. And so this is what we've been doing here in the Reason Project, is focusing on this third location, because we believe it's the most cost effective. Next slide, please. Okay, so here is the Moses Saunders hydropower dam. And on the bottom left-hand side, you see that there's this, it's about a 30-meter, 100-foot differential between the impoundment at the surface and the tail race down below, so the water is flowing from top to bottom. This is separated between Canada and the United States. It's shared equally between New York Power Authority and Ontario Power Generation. There are 32 turbines located in it, and we have sensor locations on the US shore, number 32, which is our longest running one, where I'll show you most of the data. We also have a station in the main channel and on the Canadian shore, which is operated by the River Institute in Cornwall, Ontario, our partners. And so over here on the right-hand side, you can see the turbine itself. You've got this penstock coming down. The water that we actually are drawing from comes from this penstock, and it's used to cool off the stators. So you've got these huge turbines spinning around. They actually generate quite a bit of heat. They essentially use river water as a radiator, and we are actually measuring that water before it even touches anything like a screen, before it enters into the radiators for the stators. Water's under pressure, we step it down, we get flows of about 10 liters per minute. We have a suite of instruments in them We measure their turn designs, C6s and C7s, and we measure temperature, chlorophyll A, phycocyanin, tryptophan. Heard about that this morning. Optical brighteners, specific conductivity, color dissolved organic matter, and turbidity. We also take grab samples to do total nutrients and ions. And so you can see these colors of these locations, 32, 17, and 1. And at the very top of the diagram, what you can see here are these colors, which are actually hindcasted predictions of where water was based on bathymetric and water levels. So we can predict how water flows that impinges upon each of these sensor stations. And so the water that travels the fastest is the water in the green. So I'm not showing you, but that goes up within 3 days, quite a ways upstream. The water on the near shores, the red on Canadian side, the blue on New York side, are actually a bit delayed because they're interacting with shores. They're going to bays and circulating around, and so they're actually sensing more of the near shore than the main channel itself. Next slide. Here's some data. And so here we've got 2014 to 2019. This is the prettiest data. At the very top, what we're looking at here is color dissolved organic matter, which is the gold, versus the discharge of the St. Lawrence River. And so you see the St. Lawrence River, we got that flood year in 2017, right? You see it's peaked up with just over 10,000 cubic meters per second. And there's no real correlation with the color dissolved organic matter. But if you look down below in the lower portion, what we're seeing down below here is color dissolved organic matter compared to the discharge in the Oswegatchie River, which is a low ionic strength water flowing out of the Adirondacks. And that is a much tighter correlation, which is interesting because the Oswegatchie River flows into the St. Lawrence 70 kilometers upstream. And so here we are in this dam, and we're able to detect the signal of the Oswegatchie Dam. So we are not, it's like a buoy, but we're sensing at a distance, 70 kilometers away. You can't get gliders into this area because they'd be destroyed. You can't keep buoys in these waters over wintertime because they'd be destroyed. And so in the dam location is actually a really good way to make year-round measurements safely. Next slide, please. Here we have data showing the concentration of phycocyanin, so cyanobacteria, versus temperature. And you can see there's this typical bloom, we call it, in the St. Lawrence River. Even though the Secchi disk here is about 8.5 meters, when you take a plankton net, you'll collect appreciable cyanobacteria. This is an limnology class in the field on a nice day in October. And indeed, there's gobs of microcystis in there. And what's interesting is when we get these warm spells, and as the water gets warmer each year, we're getting even more cyanobacteria. Now, this is of definite interest because people draw water from the St. Lawrence River because of its high water quality. So the next slide, please. And so to this end, we're working with the Mohawk community in Akwesasne to measure water quality in the St. Lawrence River, in the region of their territory. And so on the left-hand side, you see the St. Lawrence River flowing from left to right. We have the dam location, so we have our 3 sensor locations there. And then there's on Cornwall Island or Gananoque, we've got their treatment plant, which they call Gananoque. And then over on the down over here on the south shore is Ganadadong. And Ganadadong is in an area just where the St. Lawrence River starts to enter fully into what everyone refers to as Canadian waters. And so we're at the far end of the St. Lawrence, or sorry, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence River system. And what's interesting down here, flowing north from the state of New York, are 3 rivers: Grass River, Racket, and the St. Regis, and they impact the nearshore water quality. So just like I showed you up on the dam, we can detect water from 700 kilometers upstream. We've got water here that's impinging on drinking water facilities at Ganadadong. And so I believe I'll take the next slide, please. Try to stay on time here. these are all the groups that are involved with this, and I really appreciate the recent support from GLOS, and we're one of those groups that said we will look for further funding, and we're fortunate to have received additional funding from the Ontario Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Park just recently, and we're still looking for other funds from other organizations. I should also include here or mention at least Rion. They provided the instrumentation for us to install these sensors in the drinking water facilities in the nation of Akwesasne. So thank you very much. Oh, wait, before I stop, one very important issue, this whole idea of data sovereignty. And so this is water that people are using for their drinking water. And so one of the challenges that we have, other than the logistical challenges of sampling the water and not having the instruments touch the water that eventually goes into the drinking facility, is also the question of data sovereignty. And so this is something that we are in conversation with this community about, because who gets the access to these data? The community needs to know about it. What would it be like if someone said, "Oh, your water is not as clean as their water," and then all of a sudden there's the conflict that could come from that? And so we need to establish these rules about sharing the data and about interpreting the data. And so that's going to have to be consistent with the GSWNTA, as I mentioned before. So on that note, I'll conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Any questions before we wrap up? No questions. One thing that I thought was very interesting in with this project, Michael, was the complexity of working in the type of geopolitical environment that you are moving in. I wonder if you have any comments with regards to that to share with the audience.
Yeah, it is a challenge, Anna. Thank you for mentioning that, because it's a reality. Just getting equipment back and forth across the border is one. We get together and do little workshops. It's always a challenge. If you're familiar with the legal structure in this region, there's 3 nations, there's 2 provinces and a state. There's 4 counties. It goes on, and they are international waters, and at the same time, there's the sovereignty of the Mohawk Nation needs to be respected by all of us. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's gonna conclude. If I can, just wanted to make a quick comment to you all, if I can get to these slides. Give me a second. Oh, man. Okay. Jesus. Okay, let's see if I can, I can move them from here. All right. So very quickly, I didn't want to finish this session without acknowledging the work that other regional partners are engaging on. Some has been mentioned. Carl was talking earlier about the HF radar, the relentless work and many years of trials and tribulations that MTU invested, the support from IOOS, the support from the state of Michigan, and as well as the Mackinac Bridge Authority have been instrumental on having the Straits of Mackinac now calling home the first high-frequency radar in the Great Lakes. As Carl mentioned, it will become operational, we hope, shortly. So I wanted to mention that work. I also wanted to highlight the GLOS Hub Observing Network pilot project that started in the Great Lakes in 2020. That project basically has helped and continues to support the development and the testing of platforms and technologies that, like environmental sample processors, autonomous holographic systems that will allow us to characterize not just the existence, the presence of cyano hubs, but also the level of toxicity. This is ongoing work, and I wanted to mention or acknowledge the work of all these regional partners. And last but not least, You know, the nearshore buoy network started many years ago at GLOS, I think over 10 years, by a handful of the partners that you have here. It's grown tremendously ever since. Some of the organizations that are here as well are the ones that are running some of the gliders, like the one that Maggie was talking about earlier. There are now about 8 gliders in the region that GLOS partially or fully support, and there will be 2 micro AUVs actually coming to University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee this field season. So we are very excited about that. Now, this handful of organizations has ballooned into a very large network now, after a lot of work on the part of GLOS, support from IOOS, regional partners, and the Smart Great Lakes Initiative mini grants that you just heard about. And I'll leave it at that. I thank you very much for your attention. I'll put that down. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I know we are over time. We are going to take a break. There's some Taste of Chicago snacks out there. You may have seen some of your colleagues sneaking some in while they went to the bathroom. Feel free to take a break, get some food, go to the bathroom, and we're going to reconvene at 3:45. We do anticipate that we might go about 15 minutes over the scheduled time for the meeting. So we're going to try to conclude everything by 5:30 so that we can all have a little break before we head over to the Seagull Launch party. So be back here at 3:45. Thanks.
Decent volume. Excellent. Where's my notebook? All right, welcome back, everybody. My name is Tim Kearns, and I'm with GLOS. As you may know, some of you know me, some of you don't. That's okay. I'm happy to get to know you tonight if you're sticking around. So the next section, we're going to talk about Seagull, the value of Seagull, and we're going to conclude by launching Seagull. And with any luck, maybe even a real Seagull. I don't know. We'll see. So we are running a bit behind, and I tend to talk fast anyway. And it's like if I seem like I've had 3 Red Bulls in the last hour, I may have. So we do need to get through this section, and it's a packed section. I'm really excited. We've got some testimonials, we've got some video, we've got some demonstrations, we've got a yoga session. No, we have we've got a panel, and we've got another presentation. So it's going to be pretty fun. And I know we also have some people on the Zoom room. Carolyn Dubois, she's going to be joining our panel in a little while virtually, and that hopefully is going to go just fine. And before we really got going, I just wanted to call out my colleague Sneha Badbade, who can't be here. Kelly mentioned her earlier. She was working in Ann Arbor with GLOS, and during the pandemic, she moved home to India to take care of family, but still working for GLOS. So she's a huge trooper, and we wouldn't be here today celebrating Seagull if it wasn't for Sneha. So I just want to acknowledge her. She's been amazing. Thank you, Sneha. I still have my job because of you. All right. Well, I've got a few short slides, and then we're going to roll into some demos of Seagull that are pre-recorded by real users, and I'm looking forward to sharing those with you. So super quick, and I am Canadian, and I tend to talk fast, and I may or may not have had 3 Red Bulls in the last hour. So I'm going to talk super fast anyway, and I apologize if I'm even going too fast. I did just discover that I prepared way too many slides, so I might skip over a few in the interest of time. So Kelly has already, other people, not just GLOS staff, have already talked about this today. We have 3 main programs at GLOS. The Smart Great Lakes Initiative, which Lakebed 2030, which we talked about all day yesterday. And then, of course, Seagull is another program. All of this is supported by our OBS platforms and information network that we deploy in the Great Lakes. Seagull really was intended to underpin all of the program areas of GLOS. That was really what we were getting at. It was really the provision of open and scalable technology that would be used by all, for all,
And just to remind everyone, this was paid for with taxpayer dollars. And, we are the certified node for the IOOS program, or the regional association in the Great Lakes. And we exist to provide data and information to others, and also to receive data and information and then turn around and put that back into the Federal Archive or data warehouses or models that get fed back out to the public. I did want to rewind a little bit, just in case, if you don't have a background in software development, which is fine. I mean, I happen to have been doing it for 20 years. We going way back now, it's almost 3 years that we came up with the vision. And there was a few key things that we wanted to strive for with this product that we were affectionately calling Seagull, which back then was just a code name. But we really wanted an information system, or a user experience that was information centric as opposed to data centric. But that's a natural tension that exists in this type of culture community, because there's lots of people who are really all about the data, lots of other people all about the information. So we needed to build a system that could meet the needs of both. We also really wanted a technology platform as opposed to an application that could support a whole range of stuff, but really leveraging existing capabilities and technologies that existed. We wanted to minimize the amount of raw coding that we needed to do. So this was my architecture slide. I'm more of the PowerPoint whiteboard person as opposed to like the technical coding person, which is why people like SNEAR so valuable. Anyway, so this was the initial concept. Like, well, can we build a system that can have multiple inputs from multiple different sources and multiple different formats, put it all into one big thing in the cloud, and then have all these other technologies attached to it, whether that's IoT services that exist in a cloud infrastructure, whether that's apps and services that may or may not be built by GLOS itself, right? That could be built by others. Could we have data sources that feed into this, metadata services that feed into that? And this was the vision that we kind of came away from during the government shutdown in a library in Ann Arbor of 2019, of like, yes, we can do this. So the first thing that Kelli probably asked after presenting this stuff was, great, when's it going to launch? I learned a long time ago in software that the first thing about Seagull Launch is that you don't talk about Seagull Launch. So we really were, hesitant to discuss what we were going to launch and when we were going to launch it. And that's just how it goes with software. But fortunately, here we are 3 years later, from initial concept to standing here today. This is what we have, and I'm super happy to share it with you. So I'm not going to discuss each of these in detail, but I just wanted to share with you, these are at least, there's more than 10 major components, but of these components that we've already built into the platform today, it's cloud and IoT first. It was very important to us, and that's one of the reasons why we partnered with Spindance, whom you'll hear from later, which is an IoT company, not a observing, mapping Great Lakes observation data company. They're an IoT company. We partnered with them intentionally. We wanted discoverability to be first and foremost in this product. It was really important. Someone said, well, what's the training material that you're going to make to go along with Seagull? And I said, goodness help me if we need to make training material for people to know how to use this product, right? My mom should be able to use it because it's already familiar to her. And that's exactly what we've done with Seagull, as you'll see. We wanted it to be professional. We wanted it to operate in a software as a service sort of mindset. It needed to be modular and extensible so we could build and grow in this platform. Certainly had to be scalable. It had to be secure because yes, we live in the Great Lakes, but this is fresh water, and a lot of water treatment facilities rely on the data that flows through a product like Seagull. And there are nefarious actors out there that will corrupt or ransomware your data. No, we couldn't have that. So it needs to be secure. And we needed to be user centric, right? It's got to be user first. So everything that we did comes from the perspective of the user. You'll also see that we've also got groups built in. So if you do come from a group, then you can organize your content and your members around that. So this is a really great graphic. I don't think we have any printed copies of it, but this is the life cycle of data in the Great Lakes. It's not specific to Seagull, but just moving sort of clockwise from the top, we've got observation systems collecting data. That data makes its way into the cloud where it gets connected with other systems and maybe other data sets feed into that. Then we go to the user experience where users discover that rich content and then they interact with it. And then the last and final one is engaging with that data or engaging with that experience, which then should in turn hopefully encourage others to procure equipment and devices and get them into the Great Lakes water. Do you mind grabbing my water, Lyndon? So thanks, sorry. it's possible I've spoken too much this week. Okay, so a couple of critical milestones that I just want to point out to you. We started this product development in 2020, in June of 2020, and just as you can read the screen in the lower left, though, I wanted to call out 3 technology partners that, you know, we've got a relatively small team at GLOS. We didn't actually build it ourselves. We managed the process, and we worked and we served as product owners with the software partners that we were working with. But there's 3 companies, and you're going to hear from all 3 of them today, actually in different forms. So we've got Dig, and they led sort of the human-centered design, the experience of the Seagull app experience. We had Spindance, who largely designed and executed the development of the backend. Then we had RPS Group, who's way at the beginning of this whole process when we said, look, the first thing we need to do is to even prove whether this can work. So RPS was critical in helping us build the prototype, which, unless you already know the answer, if anyone want to raise their hand and guess what we called this prototype. It was Chick. We thought it was hilarious. I still do. So RPS Group helped us build a prototype, which proved that we could take raw data from observation platforms, pass it through the cloud, and I don't have my phone on me, and have it show up on your smartphone as an alert. That was the goal of Chick. And we couldn't have done it without RPS Group. RPS Group then also transitioned into helping us build all of the ERDAP and metadata compliance that's required as part of our IOOS obligations as we went into Seagull. So 3 partners, super valuable. We started the development. The actual coding was in November of 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. I didn't meet the development team for the first time until this week. So it was pretty phenomenal that we did all this remotely. We released our first MVP last July, after only 9 months of development. We ran a private beta for 3 months, and then we released an open beta. And we ran that for another 6 months, brings us here to today. So from beginning of writing code to launch, 18 months, which in software land is not that bad for a product the size of what we're launching today. So I'm very proud of the development team. I'm very proud of the GLOS team for helping manage all this and get us to where we are today. So that's the high level, sorry, random animation. All right. All right. This graphic is on our website. If you're interested, I'm gonna skip over it pretty quickly. But some of the major features that we released as we rolled these releases, and then today we're launching all kinds of stuff, including organizations and groups and the ability to download data, branded Seagull or nested Seagull, which it started out as nested Seagull, like this little concept of a nest. And we tried to make it branded, but nest seems to be sticking. So we'll see where it goes. Metadata management, support for all kinds of platforms. We've got a phenomenal amount of features that we're supporting. It's a beautiful product, as you're going to see. If you haven't experienced our beta product, it is a beautiful product. It's a very rich and interactive experience. It meets all of the goals that we wanted it to meet. And if you haven't used it before, then you'll be able to use it right after Kelly and I hit the red button. But I wanted to draw your attention to what's happening behind the scenes. So starting at the blue box in the upper left, we're not going to go through this whole graphic, right? We don't have time. But I just wanted to impart on you, this is a really complicated system. I don't even understand half the stuff. Some of the words I can't even read, but it's super complicated. And that's good. I mean, it kind of needs to be good, right? I mean, it needs to be not needs to be complicated, but it is complicated. It's super powerful. And if we didn't have this huge back end, we wouldn't be able to do the kinds of things like this. We have Aaron Fisk from Rayon here, and some of your colleagues are probably here as well, Aaron. This is what we're calling a nested Seagull or a branded Seagull. You'll note in the upper left corner, there's no Seagull logo. This is Rayon. This is their version of Seagull. Their users log into it. They see their data, their metadata. And if they choose to make it publicly available, and GLOS says, yes, we agree with that, then it'll move on to the public Seagull and everybody will be able to see it. The other thing that we can do with this is that, kind of like a switchboard, we can turn features on and off. So if we wanted to experiment with some new holographic imaging visualization tool or functionality, we could put that into a nested Seagull or a branded Seagull, experiment it, and if it works, then we can roll it out to the larger base. Conversely, we can also turn off features. It's all coming from the same code base. So it's not like we're building lots of deployments of Seagull that have to be individually managed. It's all one code base, which is cool. Seagull is a little bit like an iceberg. What you see on top, what you're going to experience with the app is just the stuff above the water. There's a phenomenal amount of stuff. There's the front end that you see, a phenomenal amount of stuff below the water that you don't see. That's the back end. That's the back end, the data pipelines, the APIs, the services, all the stuff, the hamsters that are making this thing spin. We're not done. There's lots to do. We're not at MVP, which is minimum viable product. We sort of passed that hurdle when we released our betas, but we're at a point now where when someone said, well, what's next for Seagull? Well, now we build on what we have. We've got a great foundation. We've got the bones of an amazing house. It's like when you buy a house and the basement's there, but it's not quite finished. Now we can go in and start finishing the basement. Unlike my house, that all I have is a basement. Okay. So lots of things to fill in as we'll go. And I'll give you an example. And, I know many of you, super important, like I'll give you an example of a data set that we're going to add, for instance, in the near future. Recreational boaters need to know where this kind of feature exists on the Great Lakes, which, and I also know there's several Canadians in the room, and yes, Starbucks is popular in Canada, but it's probably more appropriate that we have Tim Hortons location. So, all right, that's it for me. There's my contact information. I'm looking forward to the rest of the afternoon. Now, we've got, like I said, we've got 4, oops, I've already screwed it up, David. We've got 4, there we go. 4 demos. Rather than me walk through, because everyone's heard me talk too much already, even today, we've got 4 real people, real human beings that are real users of the app walking us through different use cases. I mentioned that everything we've done with Seagull starts with a user story, which is typically, as an angler, I want to find the water temperature so that I can better plan my fishing trip, as an example. That's everything we've done on the Seagull experience. So let's just see. So we've got an angler. We've got a data scientist. We have a water treatment manager. No, Brenda. And we've got another one. We're going to find out.
Hello, I'm Joe Smith, Cyber Infrastructure Engineer at GLOS. But for this, I'm Joe Smith, a data analyst that's been tasked to develop figures for a paper on precipitation trends in the Great Lakes. I am currently looking around for available data sets so I can develop a collection to compare and select from. Seagull lets me search an area of data sets available, not only through GLOS, but other sources. For example, I've heard about an interesting project from the University of Michigan called Great Lakes Integrated Sciences and Assessments, or GLISA, which has curated some modeled precipitation data for the Great Lakes region. So on Seagull, to find it, I'm actually going to go to the console. GLISA should be under groups. So I'm going to go to groups. And I'm not going to go through this entire list here. So I'm going to actually search for GLISA. So I'm going to type that in. Goes up, Great Lakes Integrated Sciences and Assessments. Click on that. Nice description of it. I'm going to click on data sets. There are 240 of them. Not going to go through this list as well. So I'm also going to search for the data set that I'm looking for. In this case, it's a model called CFSR. Type that in. Gives me 4 options. I want version 2 of the precipitation data. Click that. And then gives me a nice summary. For this, we can actually download a file through ERDAB, which is one of the few backend data services that enable Seagull users to explore and download data. So I can click on that. And we're not going to go through this entire interface here because I'm just looking for a file. So under information, there's the files thing here. Click on that. And then there's my .cdf file. Download that. And I can use an application like R or Python in order to dig into the data and produce the figures that I need.
Hello, my name is Lyndon Brinks. I am a geospatial analyst at GLOS, but today I'm an angler looking to go fishing off the coast of Oswego, New York. And I've already favorited the buoy and I'm zooming into it. And before I can go out, I need to check the conditions in the water there. So I'm going to start by checking the water temperature forecast over the next couple days. And that looks good. The temperature is going to remain in the 40s, which is what I'm looking for. And then just a quick check of off the coast here where I will actually be fishing and not at the buoy. Let's see, 42 degrees. Sounds good to me. But I need to know a little bit more about what is actually going on. So let's check the buoy. And let's look at the wave height, 0.62 feet. That's good for me. But I actually also want to know what's going on underneath the water. So I'll just click on this button in the bottom left-hand corner. It says, and let's check the water temp at depth. Okay, and now I can see the water temperature at 3 feet over the last 24 hours. Let's add in a few more depth markers. And it looks like the temperature is pretty uniform throughout, which makes sense for this time of the year. And I can look at the last 7 days, see how things have changed. Pretty still in the 40s throughout the last few days at 3 feet. Let's see if there's any change to depth. No, not really. Perfect. And that's what I'm looking for. And I think I'm ready to go out and I'll see you all on the water.
Hi, my name is David Fitch and I'm a communications specialist at GLOS. But today I'm a journalist and I'm looking for some data to help me write an article about water quality in the Huron to Erie corridor. I've heard that Wayne State is doing some work in the area and I want to check it out to see if they have anything uploaded to Seagull. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I'm logged into Seagull. I'm going to head over to the console and I'm going to see if Wayne State has made a group. And they have. You see that they have 0 members added. They do have 12 platforms and 14 data sets. So on data sets. And I see that there is some St. Clair historical data, which is of interest. And here I can just see a simple summary about the data set and the project. I can bounce over to the Water Data Detroit page. But what I want to do right now is I want to just download the data as a CSV file and then pull it in to my own application so that I can make those graphics for my article. So right here, I can start the download and I'm on my way.
Hi everyone, I'm Shelby Brenner, the Observing Technology Manager at GLOS. And today I'm acting as Brenda, the Water Treatment Manager on Lake Erie. Brenda is really interested in knowing the levels of chlorophyll and blue-green algae or phycocyanin near her water intake for the coastline of Lake Erie. So she wants to log into Seagull using her account. She has her information saved for a quick login and she zooms in to Lake Erie. You can see the water currents in the background and she knows that her closest intake is the Sandusky LEBIWW. So she sees that the levels are at a good amount. You know, everything is below 1 or 5 is really her threshold. So she's going to set an alert for future information so she won't get caught off guard. So you can set an alert for whatever amount you want. She's going to choose 5 RFU, which will tell her it's going up and that stuff is starting to happen. And we will hit save. You can name the alert to be what you want. So chlorophyll fluorescence, greater than 5 RFU, Sandusky, and hit done. And then she checks that that is saved under her profile notifications, and it is. And she checks her profile and oh, she hasn't added a phone number. So she better add in her phone number to make sure that everything is okay. And then she's going to check her preferences and she would like to receive only SMS notifications on a daily basis. And everything else looks good. So Brenda is happy and ready to receive her next alert from Seagull.
the beginnings of a beautiful relationship. But that was 4 different use cases, right? There's many, many more, and we will continue to build more support for use cases into Seagull as we continue to evolve the platform. But right now, what I'd like to do is bring Brian Toll and Daniel Like from Spin Dance up, and they're going to talk about a little bit of the behind the scenes process. How did we go from engaging with them in May 2020 through where we are today? Oops, wrong button. Such a touchpad.
Well, thank you very much, Tim. It's great to be here. I'm Brian Toll. I'm the Vice President of Engineering at Spin Dance. And I get the honor to talk about the software system behind Seagull, which is kind of like describing paint drying. So I'll try to keep it exciting. I did want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to work with GLOS, Kelly, and Tim. I like to say that software is a team sport, and you guys were great teammates. So you guys should be very proud of what you ended up with there. So let me tell you a little bit about Spin Dance, because we're kind of new to this community. We're a software consultancy based in Holland, Michigan. So we're about 2.5 hours north up the lakeshore on the other side of Lake Michigan. If you're not familiar with us, yes, we do have tulips. Yes, we have a working windmill that was imported from the Netherlands. And I was thinking too, because we're in Chicago, a little piece of random trivia. Holland burned down the day after the Great Chicago Fire. So a little bit of a connection there. Spin Dance, we've been around for about 20 years. We're really about helping organizations improve their communities and their products through software and data. We have been around for 20 years. The last 5 or 6 years or so, we've been doing that mission through Internet of Things and machine learning and digital transformation. When I bring things up like that, a lot of people go, ooh, cool, that's way in the future. The reality is all those things are here today. One of my favorite quotes is from the author and futurist, William Gibson. And he said, the future's here, it's just not evenly distributed yet. And what's cool about face-to-face conferences like this is we saw lots of really awesome things going on, low-cost buoys and gliders and all these really awesome reports with words I don't really understand. But it's really great to see what's going on there. And part of what was fun with Spin Dance is we brought a lot of the stuff we're doing for billion-dollar companies and other types of startups and applying it for what you guys are doing here at GLOS. So I'm guessing a lot of people in the room here understand what IoT is, but if that's new to you, it's essentially putting computers in everyday objects and then connecting it to the internet. So it could be a buoy, could be heavy mining equipment, could be coffee makers. These are all things that we work with on a regular basis. Once you connect that, there's really just 3 cool things that we can do with that technology. We can collect data, and that's primarily what this community is doing. We're trying to better understand what's going on in the Great Lakes. We can do remote control, which doesn't really apply here. And we can also update the software in the field. So in the same way that your Macintosh or your phone or your Windows computer can get updated and get new capabilities, we're able to do that with smart devices in the field. Another term which I want to talk about just briefly, because I think it frames so well what Seagull does, is digital transformation, which is leveraging digital technology to reinvent, first and foremost, internal operations and also customer-facing experiences. If you kind of think about that for a second, like we've been doing that for a long time. Banks have been using computers since the 60s. And I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but the way that we consume media through Netflix and Disney Plus and all that other stuff is radically different from what we did a couple of years ago. Those are all examples of digital transformation. E-commerce, I looked the other day, Amazon's market cap is $1.5 trillion. I can't get my head around that term. At the same time, I read another article, there's only 3 Kmarts left in the world. So this stuff radically changes what we're able to do. Now, what's interesting is through IoT, we're able to bring digital transformation, improvements in operations and improvements in the user experience to the physical world. That's really what's going on in manufacturing. And that's a lot of what is going on in this community. That's a little bit abstract. I wanted to talk about another product that we worked on to hopefully connect those dots a little bit for you. This is the UV Angel Adapt. UV Angel is a startup in Michigan, and they have an IP portfolio around using UVC light to kill viruses, which has been pretty popular the last couple of years. They have air purifiers and things like that. They also have this really cool device called the Adapt, which is a little thing that you put on top of keyboards. And using some machine learning, it can understand if someone's typing on it or someone's cleaning it, or if you're just walking by. And those different types of events are then sent up to the cloud. So that's the IoT part of this. What's fun about the digital transformation is that this radically improves the operations for a facility. So if you have a large hospital, you're starting to better understand how often are these keyboards actually used. And you can use that to improve dispatch of cleaning services. So instead of sending everybody just all over, on a rote schedule, you're able to dispatch cleaning crews to areas that need attention right away, or maybe there's a spot that isn't as used. It also allows an organization to better allocate assets. So if you got a section of the hospital and you got 5 keyboards and they're rarely used, you have another section of the hospital that, man, it's used all the time. You're able to give facility managers the information to more adequately distribute and make good choices. That is exactly what Seagull does. It's changing the operations of what GLOS is doing by more efficiently moving that data in a real-time way to more people. And it's opening up access to this information to people who normally would not have looked at it. So super, super exciting to be a part of it. Thank you very much. My colleague Daniel, who is the product owner and much closer to this, is going to come up and actually talk a little bit more about Seagull.
Thanks, Brian. Good afternoon. I'm Daniel Like. I'm a product owner at Spindance, which means that I work with our clients to help figure out what they should build and why, and then work with our development teams to execute on that vision. I stand here today to represent a team, and I don't have time to mention all of them, but I did want to call out Nathan Brinks. He's a principal engineer at Spindance and was instrumental in this project from the very beginning. Without his expertise and creativity, the project would not be where it is today. So I do want to just take a few minutes to talk about kind of where the process that we used and kind of some of the key design, fundamental design factors that we had for the Seagull platform. So with any big project at Spindance, we start with a design phase, which is intended to help us understand the big picture of what we're trying to build with our partners. So we start by assessing the current system, trying to understand how the information and data is flowing, how users are interacting with the technology and whatnot. We then move on to mapping, which is something very different from what we talked about yesterday. In our context, it means mapping out use cases and users and mapping out the vision for the future for the product. Those two things allow us to roll into a design, which is where we start to architect the technology and the tech stack and the solutions for, in this case, especially for a variety of users and use cases. The demo videos were great. I think they're great examples of the variety of users that we are designing for in this case. If your brother is prone to seasickness and you know what the waves are going to be like tomorrow, Seagull can help you with that. We saw the water treatment example, another perfect example of what Seagull is designed to do. So let's take a quick look under the hood here, and you can tell that Tim and I have spent a long time together. He stole my joke about going through every single one of these. That was not pre-planned, so yeah. But let's focus on a couple areas that I think are interesting. One of the first problems in an IoT project is how do you get data into the system? And it can be really complex or fairly simple. I think this case, in GLOS's case, is kind of right in the middle. The community and GLOS's partners have lots of different kinds of data. We saw lots of examples of different hardware and platform over the last 24 hours. Lots of data types, lots of communication protocols, et cetera, et cetera. And that will probably only grow with time. This isn't a situation that's prone to standardization. It's prone to diversity. So what we did is designed an adapter layer for ingest. which means we can write small bits of code that can then hook into lots of different data sources and then pull that data into our platform. It allows us to do this over time. So Tim mentioned extensibility. This is a key piece of why we designed it this way. So when somebody in this room invents a new platform or deploys a new sensor somewhere that doesn't fit the current model, we can write a new adapter for it and ingest it into Seagull without disrupting the core of the platform. Yeah, so once you have data in, I'm going to go through this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but we kind of have this journey of a data point. So we have the ingest adapter. We are ingesting those into the thing. The core of the platform here is what we call the event stream. And that's really where we process the near real-time data. It's where we can do things like run automated quality checks like Quartod and start to take actions on that data kind of in real time. That is also where we prepare it for the service layer, which is where we store data. It's where we do lots of other things. And that is where it's served out from via various endpoints. GLOS has obviously a mandate to provide access to public data. But coming out of the design phase, it was really clear to us that their vision is well beyond simple access. It's really about discoverability. And again, we designed that end of the system to be extensible and to really provide for that. For some people, going to ERDAP to configure a data download works perfectly fine. But for a lot of users, that data may as well be on a hard drive in Tim's basement. You're only going to find it if you know exactly what you're looking for. Seagull is obviously the most visible point of connection right now, but there's no reason we couldn't add other websites and other things to link in to the endpoints over time. Just a really quick touch here. Another thing that was important was a map-centric user experience. Location is obviously the context of data in this world is very important. And so a map-centric user experience is an obvious choice. And GLOS really pushed us to try to push the boundaries of just a bit on what's possible in a web browser. And so that's represented in the visualizations that we worked on for the wind, water, and temperature model data. And again, this is an example. We didn't just build these 3 visualizations. We built a pipeline that we can now replicate to visualize other types of data. And we heard about some of those earlier today that I'm assuming will be in Seagull in the future. Yeah, so this is really kind of confirms, echoes what Tim had said and what Brian said. This is a platform approach. It's not a single tool. It's not a single website. It's really a platform that will be built on over time. So just to kind of reiterate, Brian mentioned that the future is now. I think that Seagull really represents a big step forward for GLOS and it's not done. Seagull will continue to develop over time, and we're really excited to be part of that. So just wanted to say thank you also, kind of reiterate what Brian said. This has been a really engaging project for me. It's been a lot of fun. GLOS has been an excellent partner and client, and we're really excited to be part of the future of Seagull. So thank you.
Oh, thanks very much. That was great, Brian and Daniel. I don't think if you've got questions for Spin Dance or Brian or Daniel, anyone from the Spin Dance team, by all means, like find them this evening or later today and ask them. We've got our next guest coming up. I think I need another Red Bull. Is Dig with Haley Lurg and Kate Genschwet coming up to talk about the process. And it was really important, like I said earlier, discoverability, and my mom needed to be able to use this. There's so many mom jokes this week, but my mom really needed to be able to use this app without any training. It needed to be dead simple for her. And she doesn't even go boating on the Great Lakes, but she's still interested. But for the millions of people who do go boating on the Great Lakes, recreational users, as well as scientists and news people and water treatment managers, we really wanted the whole application experience to be very simple and elegant. And so we contracted with Dig to deliver on that. And they did. And they're going to talk about the process that they went through to do that. And it looks like I need to go full screen, I'm assuming. Yeah. Wish I knew.
Hey, hi, everybody. As Tim mentioned, I'm Kate Geschwint. I'm the VP of Experience Design at DIG, and Haley Lurg is one of our UX designers. We had a lot of fun working on Seagull, so we kind of just want to tell you a little bit about who we are, kind of how we work, what our process is, and then really why Seagull is important to us. So really what DIG specializes in is designing best-in-class experiences that help drive consumer growth. So one thing that we really like to do is look at the companies that we work with as a partner, not a project in our portfolio. So we really get invested in Tim's mom and the data scientists and everyone else that uses Seagull or whatever project that we're working on. So we're a lot like you. We're a small company. We work pretty lean, but really we kind of specialize in 3 areas. We do UX design. We also do some tech, and also marketing. So we're really a full service shop that can kind of help you get from who is it that you're trying to create a solution for all the way through marketing that and watching it in the real world. So kind of what does that mean? It's kind of vague. So we'll get into that a little bit. So a lot of what we do is start with the why. So as UX experts, really what we're here to do is make sure that we're helping you figure out what is the assumed problem that you're trying to solve, and then how are we going to achieve a solution for that problem? So we ask a lot of questions. We really want to understand, why are you looking to do something? So I'm sure GLOS can kind of attest to that. We really asked a lot of poking, pointed questions. But really the purpose of that is so that we get to align with your team, really make sure we understand everything. We look at ourselves as an extension of your team. So it's really important to us to not just assume what your users want, but really know what your users want. And so with that, I kind of want to go over like a high level, pass it over to Haley here, of kind of our process and how we work, and kind of what does that actually look like.
So we follow human-centered design principles. So if you have ever heard of the term double diamond, this is kind of what that represents. We follow a 3-phase system: evaluate, discover, and produce. And we followed this process with Seagull and with the GLOS team. So what it really means is that we're starting with an assumed challenge. The problem that you think you're facing has a lot of assumptions built in behind it. So we go into a discover phase where we're doing a lot of research, we're talking with people, we're doing a really deep dive into all of the different kind of aspects and viewpoints that we can take at this problem. And we start to kind of outline KPIs, which are key performance indicators, and prioritize. We can't solve all the problems with a single product. So how do we prioritize what problems we can solve right away, how quickly we can solve them, what order we should, and kind of zero in to make sure that we're coming to a defined problem. And then from there, we go into the produce phase where, again, we're expanding, and that's where we're coming up with solutions. So that's where the actual design and production comes in. We're wireframing, we're sketching out solutions, we're prototyping, we're testing. Testing is a really big thing that we do because, we have all the assumptions in the world on how we would use products, but we're not data scientists. We need to get this product in front of you guys and in front of the real world to see, is this useful? Is it accomplishing the goals that we're trying to solve for? And if not, how can we go back to that drawing board and keep iterating and keep making it better? So I won't go through all of these, but these are just some of those deliverables that we do in that discover phase. So in that research phase, we did a lot of these for Seagull. We had to do a lot of company, and I'll just say industry research. None of us at DIG are water scientists. We're, boaters and kayakers and water enthusiasts, but learning acronyms, learning gliders, learning about SONs and profiling, like that was very foreign to us. So we had to take a lot of time to really know and understand these really complicated and impressive systems that you guys are working with on a day-to-day basis. So that was a big thing that we did. We do a lot of user research. So again, even getting the chance to talk to you guys at this conference has been invaluable to us, learning how you guys want to use this product, what problems that we're really solving for. It's just been really invaluable to get to know that. ADA compliance is a big thing that we work on too. Americans with Disabilities Act, for those of you that don't know. And it's basically just making sure that the product is usable for a variety of different people, no matter what their ability level is. There's a lot of things that go behind that. And then we kind of start to zero in, outline KPIs. We have a roadmap for Seagull built out. Like everybody has said, we have a product out there, but it does not mean that's the end. It means that that's the beginning of something that's very exciting and very cool. And we're continuing every day to, work on, there's all these great ideas, like what can we work on next? And then, we kind of go back into our production. So this is where the fun, like where Kate and I have the most fun, I think, is really getting pen to paper and solving these problems and iterating and coming up with ideas. That's where the interface comes in. That's where the interactions come in. We do user flows, which I have a couple examples that we'll show here in a minute, but that's just looking at the steps from a user's perspective. What steps do the users have to take to accomplish a task, and then how can we, find little areas in there that we can improve on. And it's just really enlightening to see it from the user's point of view and not just from a designer or a developer's point of view. So we do a lot of production and testing, again, to put that product out into the market, and it's very iterative. So we're going to keep going through this over the next couple of years. So zeroing into Seagull, the opportunity that we were given a little over a year ago, we were asked to design a platform for water enthusiasts to observe, connect, discover, and engage with data from the Great Lakes, which is a big ask, right? That's a lot of things that we're trying to do all in once. And for a lot of different types of audiences, not everybody is going to use this product the same way. So we're accomplishing a lot of things for a lot of different people. These are some of the visual examples. That top left one is an example of a mural board that we did. I don't know if this is bringing back a lot of memories. This was a long time ago that we did this, but we had probably like 20 or 30 of those boards, all about different things that we were trying to accomplish, kind of getting all the ideas out on paper. That's the place you have to start. So that was a specific user. I think we were looking at like a boater. What are their key characteristics? Who are they, right? We have to know kind of their little bit of age demographics and just kind of understanding who they are. What are their content goals? What are their pain points? What are their actual goals that they're trying to accomplish? Really just understanding the people that we're building this product for. And we had a lot of different ones of those. The top right one is a user flow. So that's what I was saying, it's step by step. Like if we have that boater, what steps does he need to take to log into Seagull, find the buoy that he's looking for, favorite that buoy, create an alert. Before we do any of the design, we're literally writing step by step, what does that person need to do? That helps us kind of see everything very quickly from a high level view, make sure we're covering all of our bases. And then from there, we go into low fidelity prototypes, which is another word for wireframe. And that is, they're not very pretty to look at, but they're very necessary. It's quick iterative design to take the user flows and put them onto screens so we can start to see the flow of this product and start to see it come to life a little bit. And that's easy and quick to iterate on, right? There's no development behind this right now. It's just gray boxes and text boxes on a screen. So it's very quick to test this, get it in front of people. Is this right? Validate it. Go into high fidelity prototype where that's where we're layering on the UI and colors, fonts, the look and feel of Seagull. What do we want this to look like? And then that's just the experience that's driving the whole engine here. So specifically why we loved working on Seagull, we took a little field trip, a dig field trip out to Port Sheldon, which is about 5 miles out on Lake Michigan. And we had Seagull and it was in the beta version. So we had the live Seagull app on our phone and we went out there. We're like, we know people are going to be using this app while they're on a boat, while it's sunny, while there's water splashing up on the boat. Can they still interact with it? Can they still get what they need to do? Plus we got to take like a half day off of work and go out on the boat. We got beat up a little bit. The waves were pretty rough that day, but no one's complaining. But that's kind of to wrap up like what Kate was saying. We really see, GLOS as a partner, right? We're not just sitting behind a desk like pixel pushing. We're not doing that. We actually truly care about this product that we're building, how people are going to use it and how it's going to make, this digital transformation and your guys' jobs a lot easier. So this is kind of where we ended, a connected data platform for water lovers, and feel like a broken record, but this is just this is just the beginning. We're very excited to have this product out there, to see how you all use it and any ideas you have in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate and Haley, for that. And, just to remind everyone, while we're inviting all our panelists to come up, that Derek, Kelly, Will, and Carolyn's already here, come up to the stage. But just to remind everyone, we built this during a pandemic, right? And not only did we do that, so, that whiteboard, or the sticky notes, the mirror board, I should say, that Haley was showing, that was the equivalent of sticky notes on a whiteboard. That is exactly what it was. And instead of all of us being in a conference room for weeks on end, talking and arguing about this stuff, we were on Zoom calls for hours on end. And we were also doing it over multiple time zones. Sneha was in India, I'm on the West Coast, and everybody was very accommodating. But it was also a huge accomplishment to show what you could do if you really put your minds to it. So with that, and we are running a little bit behind, try and do two things at once. So I'm going to invite my panelists up. We've got Derek Snowden from the IOOS Program Office. We're going to talk briefly about the value of Seagull, and it's only going to take an hour or two. And we've got Kelly Nee from RPS Group. I think the microphones will automatically work. And then we've got Will Haney from WWMT News, right? And then Carolyn Dubois from the Gordon Foundation, and her organization makes Data Stream, which is a product that measures water quality in watersheds all over, and they just released a product called Data Stream Great Lakes. So super quick, and this will also be a good test for us with the audio with Carolyn. Hey, Carolyn, welcome. If everyone could just take literally 30 seconds and just introduce yourself and where you're from. And then I've got a few questions for you, and we're not going to be up here that long because we're a little bit short on time. Right.
Yep. Hello. Check, check. Mine works. All right, I'll go first. My name is Will Haney. I live in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I'm an on-air meteorologist for News Channel 3, which covers the Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo area, all of West Michigan. I'm here because I do also some environmental and weather science-based reporting. So it's not uncommon for me to be diving pretty deep into Great Lakes data in order to tell some sort of a story. Also reported pretty extensively on the record high water levels.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Nee. I'm the Executive Director of RPS Ocean Science. I'm from Providence, Rhode Island. We have been involved with GLOS and data management for, gosh, a lot of years now. I think my first annual meeting was 2013. So more than 10 years, I would say at this point. RPS is a sort of a modeling and a data management company. And so we look at both sides of the data problem.
And I'm Derek Snowden. I'm from the IOOS Program Office. Been there for about 13 years and have been involved in the design and implementation of our data management and cyber infrastructure now program, which we serve as the national focal point for the 11 regional associations, how they implement data management protocols, the standards and policies therein. And generally, I'm here as a cheerleader for one of the regional associations that took a big leap forward with Seagull. So I'm excited to be here.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. I can't tell if people can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Okay, Carolyn Dubois, and I'm joining you from Toronto, which is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Very sorry not to be there today. I'm experiencing major FOMO watching you all enjoying Chicago delights. I am the executive director of DataStream, which is a water quality data sharing platform that's operating in regions across Canada and has just recently been released in the Great Lakes region. And very, very happy to be here to celebrate this big milestone for Seagull.
Well, thank you very much, Carolyn, for joining us. And I don't know what the opposite of FOMO is, but we wish you were here too. So, all right, well, just to get right to the point. So we're not really here to talk about Seagull per se. I mean, we are, but we're not you don't have to answer it as an advertisement for Seagull. I've done plenty of that. But really, it's more about platforms like Seagull, and all of you, maybe not you so much, Will, but all of you have experience with this. Will, you probably interacting with them. And I guess my question for you is, what's a trend you're seeing in technology, particularly in the shift from data to information transformation that you're seeing? And, is that like a critical piece of the decision-making process for you or for users?
I'll start. Okay, I'm going to start actually by talking about trends and users, and then I'll talk about trends and technology. I think that users and consumers of data have become really more informed about the data sources that they're using over the years. And I'm going to tell a dad's story, not a mom's story. What really drove this home for me is when I walked into my house last fall, my father said, "Kel, can you tell me why the European model is better than the American model?" And I thought, God, we need to sit down and have a beer and talk about that. When I started at RPS in 2004, I think my father thought we were building like physical models of like wave tanks and stuff, right? So he went from thinking about modeling as a physical thing to really understanding what a numerical model was and the differences between them. And you see that all the time. And when you're making decisions with friends and family to go out for the day, you have all this information coming at you, and you're doing this sort of informal assessment of the information and deciding how to act, how to dress, whatever. And then you have more advanced data users. We work a lot with the offshore wind community on the East Coast, and they're making critical decisions about operating offshore every day, right? And they really are starting to realize just how many observations, how many different models are at their fingertips, and are starting to ask questions like, well, which model is the best one for the conditions that are going on right now? Which model can I trust? And technology has really taken us to the point where we can do on-the-fly model validations, right? We can combine our observation data streams with our models, do an on-the-fly validation, and really look at what model might be doing the best right now for the decision that you're trying to make. And so I would say the trends in technology that I would be really excited to see more advanced is like looking at AI and machine learning, and how can we take that model validation to the next step and really automate kind of telling these advanced users what model that they should be putting their trust in the moment, right? The other thing is, and we've talked a lot about this over the last couple of days, reducing the data wrangling, so that data sort of collection, processing, cleaning, and nobody wants to spend their time doing that, right? They want to do the high value and, quite frankly, more fun data analysis, data visualization. So how can we use technology, the cloud, the tools at our fingertips to kind of reduce the time on data wrangling and move everything to the left and do that analysis, or sorry, move everything to the right and do that analysis and visualization, fun stuff.
Thanks, Kelly. Derek, Carolyn? Yeah,
Sure,
Derek,
I'll jump
all right,
in.
Derek's gonna go, Carolyn.
So I'll take this a little bit from the no perspective, because you said just about everything I wanted to say in your presentation, including the joke. And then Daniel stole my joke about the joke. So I'm going to retool here. I think in NOAA, there's two things that are becoming more to the forefront of our conversations about data and information. And I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name, but the people from DIG, they called it user-centered or human-centered design, I think. In NOAA, we call that service delivery, right? Different word for the same thing. And I'm hearing it in almost every conversation I've been a part of over the last 2 days about this recognition that you have to involve the end user at the moment of kind of inception of the idea, when you start planning this, and it has to be iterative all the way through. So that's seemingly not a new concept, but our agency has actually just written it down and committed to figuring out a way to do that. And so now we have a policy, and it's a very bureaucratic approach, but it's a recognition that we can't do this alone, and just putting things out there for the world is not likely to be successful. So that I see that as one trend, not necessarily technologically. And the other one, Kelly mentioned AI and that sort of thing. You don't have to do deep calculations to just look at the volume of data and the complexity of data. And our old model, from the time that probably everyone in here who went to graduate school or went to college is used to downloading data, putting it on their laptop, and firing up MATLAB and crunching away or whatever it is. And just the volume of data is not going to allow us to do it anymore. We have to figure out ways to bring the computation to the data, not the data to the computation. And that changes the whole architecture of things. And a part of that, the cloud is certainly a part of that. but it's not the answer. It has to be engineered in a way that it is accessible to people who know how to use that technology. So those are the two things: big data and really interacting with the users.
Thanks, Derek. We'll go to Carolyn and then we'll finish on Will, if you've got a response.
Yeah, I think picking up on a few things that have been said, around trust and wrangling data so that it can be used. I have, I think one of the thoughts I keep having and thinking about, everything that's been said today is, what's really different these days is who's doing the science in the first place. And I think that that's really powerful stuff. So there's a lot of community monitoring, who's demanding the science, I think is changing. We often ask ourselves the questions, well, how are we going to communicate this to like Joe Public? I think when communities are involved in collecting data in the first place, you're sort of halfway there, because you do have people out on the ground, out in hip waders, and they are asking and answering questions that are locally relevant, because I think that's one of the big areas that's been missing. So yeah, if we're trying to move from data to information, that, you really do close the circle when you're involving people from the get-go who are sort of on the ground, on the water. So that's something that we've seen that's really changed. And then more generally, and this is, this is obvious, but I think for many of the people who will be here today, but so encouraging, is there's so much more openness around data flows, and that's going to be an absolute game changer. I think gone are the days of being protective of data. There's a realization that when we do allow systems to interoperate and connect, and when data is shared openly, I mean, that just unlocks so much more potential. So that's something that we're really excited about with Great Lakes Data Stream for sure, and in this collaboration with Seagull as well.
All right, thanks, Will.
And whoa, okay. I talk loud, I project. So in my world, in broadcast meteorology, right? 10, 15 years ago, the competition would have been another TV station in our market. And while that is still true, oftentimes it's kind of referred to nowadays, your competition is the cell phone, right? So people have 100% shifted to getting data on their own. And that's forecast information. The apps now that are out there are quite frankly, just really advanced. People, what you were talking about, your dad can go look at Euro data on his phone. And so my world is trying to create a forecast that's relevant to people and essentially just offering them something they can't get on their phone. So to answer your question, I think, yes, like people, we've come a long way in terms of obviously like where people are getting their data. I think they are wanting more, and like kind of what you were saying, I think people have really come a long way in terms of just their everyday knowledge of what's available to them.
All right. Well, I'm gonna, as my friend from Microsoft said, let's double click on that.
There you go.
That was terrible. Anyway, we've got mom references and bad dad jokes. So, but you referenced something about smartphone use, and I mean, I would say one trend that we're seeing is the cost of devices is decreasing, like smart devices, whether it's a water level sensor or an air quality sensor, or there's another company John Robinson was talking about from Mazarine Ventures. They'll send you a water quality sample kit for free, and then you just upload it to the cloud when you're done, and we can capture that data. So the price and not only the price is coming down, the ease of use is going way up. So, which is great, right? But then where does a platform like Seagull fit into that? Like, have we done all this for naught? What do where does a platform like Seagull fit?
We go left to right. Where does it fit? Certainly, the way that you've described it and the way that the engineers describe the platform, it has the capability to ingest data easily, and that's pretty transformative, right? That's been a big bottleneck for us over the past 15 years. It's just getting data into some managed system takes more time, effort, money than has been allocated to it. So I think that is, like I said, transformative. The thing that I worry about is the quality, right? It is so easy to put bad data in the system now that we could be introducing things that might not be relevant to a decision today. But if we go back and try to look at this in a climate context and look at 20 years or 30 years worth of data, it's hard to detect those changes when you're looking at over climate change time. So I think really focusing on the quality, that's an area where where once you have it into a managed system, then you can start to think about who's going to look at it and how are they going to compare it and what are the different types of systems that we need to be comparing against each other. But anyway, that would be my one hope, is that that's really built into the design, is that there needs to be, and it can't be automated, right? That's a scientific trained eye to really look for those observational biases, I guess.
All right, thanks, Derek. I'll turn it to Kelly.
Sure. And I think that any system that reduces barriers to entry for data providers, barriers to use for data consumers, it's providing a really powerful backbone to enable collaboration. 20 years ago, and I wasn't involved in IOOS 20 years ago, but IOOS started building this amazing community. IOOS and the regional associations built this amazing community. That community adopted standards, they adopted ways of doing things that, I mean, I think of it as transitioning kind of from the Wild West into something that we can wrap our arms around, right? We understand the standards, the data standards, the services, the metadata formats now. And because of all that work, now we can start looking at the barriers and the hurdles and how do you get those down? How do you make it easier for everybody else to play in that IOOS world? And I think that's where we are now. And I think that's what Seagull is starting to really get at, right? I got it really getting to like plug and play data. The quality, of course, is important, but I got a weather flow tempest weather station for Christmas from my husband, which was like he nailed that present. It was awesome. And we didn't put up until last weekend. I'd been kind of procrastinating, like putting the pole in the ground that I needed to mount it on and all of that. And so I got that done. I'm like, oh, now I got to set the thing up. All right, let me get the instructions. I open the box and I pull everything out, and it's just a QR code in the box. I'm like, okay, cool. Scan it with my phone, downloaded an app, created an account. The weather station was sitting on the table next to me. I hadn't mounted it yet. And all of a sudden the temperature in my house popped up on my phone. I'm like, okay, cool. Like this is true plug and play. Now, Weatherflow's got some skin in the game on that one, right? Like they are essentially benefiting from the fact that I bought one of these things and now they have a private weather network. Right. But if we can get to that point for other data providers, it would be so cool to make it that easy.
Yeah, I love stories like that. That's amazing. Carolyn, you want to go first? You've got a
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm happy that we've brought up, I think this is all so exciting and it is plug and play, and some things are going to be plug and play, but just to pick up on that, that comment around data quality, it's something that we keep hitting as well. And I think it's really important to think about. So as we look at, things becoming more and more interconnected from a technological standpoint, what we keep reflecting on is that there still needs to be people involved, that experts are still important, that you're going to need different experts and different people within communities. And I mean that in terms of all sort of, academic communities, like, actual, municipalities and so on, to deliver messages that the data is telling us in some cases. I think a lot back to, at the very beginning of when we started building DataStream in a whole other region in Canada about 9 years ago. People said, we want a system that tells us, so, you can just log in, it will see where you are. And it tells us, can we drink the water? Can we eat the fish? And is our ecosystem changing? And I know I'm preaching to the choir with this room when I say answering those questions, they're subjective, they're context dependent. It's really hard to just build a bot that's going to tell you the answer to those incredibly complex and personal choices that people need to make. So yeah, I think with all of the technology, we have it's exciting. We've got to build sort of the human capacity alongside that and the institutional capacity to make the most of like this power, I think, that we're generating collectively. So that's my thoughts on that.
Will, you must see some of this stuff in your world.
A little bit, like user generated content would be like kind of the way I would describe it. So it's not necessarily hardcore data or anything like that, but I do think there's a yearning from the public to want to contribute if there is a way to do that that is successful, that would be beneficial to Seagull. I think people would be willing. I think boaters, those in like the fishing industry and things like that would definitely be on board with if they knew, okay, this maybe one of those muscle data sensors for like a boat, right? If there was a a version of that was more available to the public, I think boaters would even be willing to do stuff like that, just if they can feel like, oh, okay, my boat is contributing to this network of data that could help the Great Lakes. I think they'd be on board. That's, you guys are talking about stuff that's pretty cool.
Yeah, okay, well, you know what, let's extrapolate that a little bit. No more double clicking, but we'll take that to the next level. You know, I think somebody said user generated content. Well, what if they didn't even have a weather station in their backyard, or they didn't have a water quality station on their own, but everybody has a smartphone in their pocket. So is there a role for specifically the smartphone in this type of interconnected ecosystem of data and information that we're talking about? I'll leave it at there, because I've got my ideas, but sort of, and I'm specifically talking about the device that we already have. Is there a role for that with this type of technology we're talking about? Platforms like Seagull. Kelly's nodding, so you go first.
I'm looking too enthusiastic. A light bulb went off in my head about that when Tom gave his presentation on coastal flooding, because you talked a little bit about validation and the lack of data to validate your model, which is always a challenge, right? There's an app out there called My Coast that sends alerts based on events that are happening to people that have signed up to go and take pictures, right? And so I live on the East Coast, so I get alerts when there's king high tides and when there's nor'easters and hurricanes. And they ask you to please safely go out and take a picture of the flooding near your house. And I was thinking during Tom's presentation, like, what a cool data set that would be in order to validate some of the modeling that you're doing. And I think there's absolutely a role for platforms like Seagull for bringing together these, what I would call informal observations, I guess, with more formal modeling and formal observation systems, and having them sort of leverage and benefit from each other.
Yeah, great ideas. Carolyn, you got a perspective? Derek and Will.
Well, I mean, there's like the smartphone has definitely unlocked this amazing potential where everyone can sort of be involved in, like you said, I think images alone, I mean, that's so exciting. And so, yeah, I'm just going to say ditto on that. Absolutely. I think that this gives people an opportunity to participate in a new way. And we just have to build the systems to capture what's being captured by people out on the ground and seeing things.
Derek?
I'm trying to think of something that is new. We've got a couple of examples of doing exactly that. And in the Gulf Coast of Florida, there's a project to analyze images that come in. There's a little bit of an extension that has to go on the phone, but it actually tells you whether or not there's the presence of the harmful algal bloom. And I've forgotten what the name of the particular species is, but that is working, that has been proven, and they're beginning to deploy that up and down the coast. So that's a pretty interesting example. But I agree with what she said. I mean, anything that you can extract from an image is fair game for a cell phone, right? Now you can also extrapolate that to audio and video, and yeah, the opportunities are endless.
All right.
I'm lost for words, but I would agree. Like, I think photos are a huge untapped thing. Well, they're somewhat tapped, but yeah, like photos are huge. If there was a way for people to report things that they're seeing in real time, I think that's also just good for data validation, right? Like we're talking about algae blooms and things like that. When one of those happens, getting eyes on the ground, someone maybe reporting what they're seeing. People in the boating, fishing world would be probably pretty knowledgeable on things like that. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, that's all right. Well, I mean, multiple channels of information that could come from the smartphone, whether it's quality controlled or not, maybe is irrelevant if it's more like ground truthing or photos or validating existing observations. Were you going to say something else, Derek?
Well, I was just thinking as Kelly brought up My Coast, and she mentioned that last night at dinner, and I was like, oh yeah, I heard about that like 3 years ago. And I probably hear of those examples, multiple times a month. And I wonder if that's something that GLOS can do for this community. I mean, they're very regionalized usually. Help them find the things that they could be useful that you're not necessarily building, but you're linking them to. It strikes me that that might be a way to build out what your core infrastructure of pulling in this data, but then other people are building apps on top of your data store. It's fairly easy to upload an image to a website, and I'm sure Spindance can figure that out, right? If they haven't already done it.
Yeah, a good observation. All right, well, one question left, and it's a bit open-ended, so I'll ask you to cap it with 60 seconds or so. But it's really, I mean, given everything that we've talked about today and your own personal and professional experience, where do you see data and information in the Great Lakes going in the future? Carolyn, why don't we start with you, and then we'll come back and end with Derek.
It is such a big question. I'm excited and encouraged by all of the good work that's happening. We had time to think about this question ahead of time, and I still am mulling over it really, but because I feel like what I've come to is this sort of motherhood statement, but it's true, which is collaboration. We have to make the most of all of the energy, all the good work that these talented people and smart people on the ground, smart people in offices are doing. And the only way to do that is to build connections, the right connections between things. It makes you more agile. It doesn't sort of center, one way of doing things. You're going to have a lot of different solutions sort of bubble up, and they're going to be good at different things. And so accepting and understanding that there are, a lot of different ways that we have to pull data in, that we have to push data out, who it has to be sent to. So, again, I'll just come back to it. It's collaboration. It's openness to collaborating. It's understanding that one size does not fit all. I think a lot about, we're talking about smartphones. I'm thinking about the data types we bring in, which are, it'll be hundreds of parameters from laboratory analysis. It's like, all right, there's a whole pipeline, that's complex. And so just acknowledging the complexity of different types of data and working with them all and hopefully weaving them all together. And I will also say, acknowledging other ways of knowing. So Indigenous knowledge, for example, and involving people in those processes too, because, ultimately the context is really important. You can tell people that, that the levels of nutrients are high. What does that mean to them? I think these are things that we have to be thinking about. So collaboration, I'll leave it at that. That was probably more than 60 seconds.
That's a great answer. Will, sure.
Future of Great Lakes data for me, I think, would be one more accessible. I think what's really cool to me about Seagull specifically is just I've never seen a product this user-friendly that I think kind of what you were talking about, Tim, like an everyday person could hop on there and learn something. And I think that's the most exciting future for me, just in like I said, in my world, but also just more data points and more buoys potentially, and things like that for forecasting. I forecast the beaches, boating, essentially. That would be very valuable to me.
All right, great. I think we call that accessibility equity. Right?
Fancy.
There you go. Okay, Kelly.
Over the last couple of days, there's just been this, there's this very cool culture of continuous improvement here, right? We've heard about models and gliders and buoys, and over at the Pendry Hotel, there was a code sprint going on where a bunch of software engineers were looking at some of the common challenges of the data management world, right? So I think that, the future for the Great Lakes of data information is, continuing to enable that continuous improvement, but bringing it all together and kind of finding that sweet spot between expertise and data and user experiences and needs. That really is like, I've got a Venn diagram in my head that you can't see. And that insights is like right in the middle there, right? But continuing to focus on that sweet spot, and it's going to change, right? As everything, as our data, as our expertise changes, but continuing to focus on that.
All right. I think in the future of the Great Lakes, I hope that people follow GLOS and they're able to utilize the investment that you made. I work for NOAA. I'm a civil servant. I work for the taxpayer. I want the data that's collected here to help make our national and global weather forecast better, to make our ocean forecast, Great Lakes forecast better. We need the data that is collected by all of you and all of your communities to help make those models and forecast better so that you can deliver a better weather forecast on TV. And so GLOS has beaten down that trail of how to get data into the National Archives and into the National Prediction Centers. They have become certified. That was not a trivial task. And I hope that is something that this community can utilize.
All right, thanks very much. So we heard collaboration, accessibility and diversity, I think I also heard you say well, and then we had community and insights, and then we had sort of growth and following sort of proven models really for accessing that information. I would say sort of how you wrap it up. All right. Well, thanks, Terry. With that, that concludes our panel. Thank you so much. I know it's short but sweet. Sincerely appreciate your insights. Could you flip the paper on the?
Hi, I'm Rick Wilson, Manager of Data and Analytics at Conservation Ontario. I live and work in a town called Newmarket, just north of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I wanted to take this opportunity to congratulate the Great Lakes Observing System for the release of their new app, Seagull, an app that promises to harness the Internet of Things to turn data into actionable information and insights. Conservation authorities have been hard at work over the past several years collecting and sharing data for use in apps just like this. I want to thank GLOS for their support and encouragement over the years and for helping us get data into the hands of Great Lakes users. Keep up the good work.
Hi, I'm Peter Carey, and I live on the shore of Lake Michigan. And I just wanted to stop by and thank everybody at Great Lakes Observing System for all they do for residents like us that are on the shore of the big lake. And I also want to voice my support for the Seagull app. We're avid stand-up paddlers. We like to paddle surf when the waves are up, and if it's nice and calm, we'll be taking long leisurely paddles up and down the shore of Lake Michigan. It's important for us to know about the conditions out there. Is it even safe to go in the first place? Are we going to need a wetsuit? Is it one of those days? Is it going to be sunny? Is it going to be really windy? Where are the currents going? Which way are we going to end up? Anyway, I wanted to thank everybody at GLOS and tell them keep up the good work. See you out there.
I love that guy. All right, you know, both of those individuals were real people. You know, they weren't. It wasn't like me asking our staff to record a demo pretending they were a real person. So, no, I mean, we needed to have the demos and because we want to show specific functionality, but it was also great to get testimonials. And I don't know where David is, but I believe Peter, I think his name was Peter, who recorded that video. That was like, I don't know if it was unprompted, but I mean, he did that on his own. It was amazing. Rick Wilson is with Conservation Ontario, and he's a longtime partner of GLOS as well. But you know, that's real stuff there, and we've gotten so much amazing feedback so far from our beta community. We're really looking to scaling it out. Now, all of that, everything we do in Seagull, right, is underpinned by data, and I think you know by now, like I don't own a boat and I don't own a buoy. We really rely on our technology partners to procure and deploy this technology and some of her stuff through the mini grant process, right? That's how we get gear in the water. And it's really important that we continue to grow that. And one of our sponsors here, So Far Ocean, you know, they make technology. And so Sebastian Boulay is going to come up and talk about, I don't know why that's up there, talk about your company and your technology and how you're supporting acquisition of data in the Great Lakes.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sebastian Boulay. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. You might pick up an accent. It's because I'm French, but I live in New Zealand, and So Far Ocean is located in San Francisco. And I'm an oceanographer and a director of business development at So Far. And for those of you that don't know us yet, we are a team of about 50 oceanographers and engineers. And I'm here with my colleague Zach, who's in the back. And you might find him next to the hot dog stand tonight too. And I know it's been a long day for everyone. I'll try and keep it reasonably short and simple. Go. And this here is our mission statement. We want to connect the world's oceans, and we are fundamentally doing this to help people progress their understanding of science and give the keys to understand their local environment. And unfortunately, this approach is not simple, and it presents some complexities. And the big bottleneck, as most of you will know, is the access to in situ data to marine observations. And this is typically made complicated by the cost of the sensors, the complexity of deployment, and the accessibility of the data itself. And our vision really is to empower everyone, scientists or not, engineers or not, to collect the marine data that matters to them. For example, here on the screen, all the yellow dots you can see are drifting spotter buoys that we have deployed across the ocean. All of these buoys every hour report their spectral wave data. What we do with this is we enhance, we improve our global model forecast so we can produce a high quality forecast and ship routing solution, for example. Don't mind if I do. So this is where it all begins. That's the spotter buoy. It started about 8 years ago as a research program initially. And funnily enough, about at the same time, I was working on a project that was using smartphone-based accelerometers to try and measure waves with my previous employer. And I went quite far down the track trying to get something to work. And these guys came up with the buoy. So there was no point for me going any further. So from a research project, it really became a commercial operation quite quickly when the word spread that there was an affordable, low-cost, compact wave buoy available. And it's already really widely used by weather agencies around the world, coastal engineers, port authorities, and they're about 30 to 40 times cheaper than your standard wave buoy. And because of their small size, you can now use small vessels of opportunity. It's much simpler to travel with it. We took it on a plane with us. I have a lot of photos of heavy legs with a wave buoy in the middle from people traveling and taking them on the plane. Didn't share any of those. You're welcome. And you can see here on the screen, for example, fishermen in Alaska and Vanuatu that deployed buoys on behalf of researchers during the COVID pandemic. And that was especially important to be able to do that, to do data collection on behalf of researchers when no one could travel for the past 2 years. And with the low cost and the ease of use of the buoy, we can now also step away from the hardware, step away from the equipment, and just focus on the data itself. Now, smart mooring here on the screen is just an extension to the spotter buoy. We quickly realized that some of our users were trying to integrate additional sensors with duct tape, metal wire, more or less success. We tried to do it ourselves instead. So we used the spotter buoy, the surface unit, as a power and telemetry system for underwater sensors. That means that now all those underwater sensors that you may already own, now you can get the data in real time, and you can use that for real-time warning systems, for example. And for example, we have this pressure sensor configuration that can collect real-time water level measurements. Now, I will show you some examples of deployments that happened in the region over the past 2 years. And with the pandemic starting a couple of years ago, a lot of our agencies found themselves in a difficult situation to keep operating and delivering the data that was expected from them. And that's about the time we got in touch with the team at GLOS, helping them fill the gap during this difficult time. And you can see here on the screen a couple of spotter buoys and their smart moorings on the back deck of a boat. You can see how little space it really takes on a boat. The Michigan Technological University, led by John Lenters, was at the back and will answer your questions if you have any. Also took the lead on a few data collection opportunities. And there was a clear and urgent need to reduce the data gap, and all hands were required on deck. So after one of his buoys decided to go on a short trip after its mooring broke, John decided to deploy a drifting buoy and a smart mooring with temperature sensors on purpose this time. And it was a pretty exciting project, being able to follow all the developments and the buoy trajectory online, on social media, and on the buoy dashboard. And the intentions were clear. It was to test the buoy itself as a drifter, but also to try and understand the Keweenaw Peninsula current. I hope I said that right. There we go. And a couple of weeks later, the buoy was retrieved and sent back to the lab for post-processing. You can see the trajectory here on the screen, and you can see the Coriolis spiraling. at the beginning of the drift before it decided to drift along the peninsula before being recovered. More recently, another buoy decided to go for another tiki tour after breaking its mooring again. John would answer your questions. It was a pretty poor timing though, and the ice on the lake made the immediate recovery impossible. And the buoy drifted for a while before getting iced up and going dark for a few days. But it wasn't quite a nice surprise when it came back to life a couple of months later, floating freely again, as you can see on the screen. And this really proved that the buoy could survive a winter in the ice. And even though obviously the measurements are not great during that time, but from a field work and deployment point of view, it's quite interesting because you can now consider deploying the buoys on ice and wait for them to break free later on in spring. I want to shine the light on another amazing user of our buoys, Hayden Henderson, who is not here. He's currently on the boat deploying buoys, and we previously worked with John at MTU too. And Hayden probably knows our buoys just as well as we do, testing them to their limits. And the video shows deployment he did with the Sleeping Bear Surf and Kayak Shop. So we talked about engagement with stakeholders and citizens before. This is a really good example of just using local folks with a local boat to collect marine data, or to collect data rather. And as I mentioned, Hayden also decided that after taking it easy during the pandemic was not an option. And he took it upon himself to test the deployment of the buoy from a helicopter without asking us if it was a good idea at all. And yes, we were actually testing the exact same capability but at the same time, but he did not know that. And the buoy worked and survived, and it was dropped from about 50 feet above the lake in February. And once again, not the best timing. And it was also promptly stuck on ice for a while and collecting some good data before that, including some serious 15-foot swell. But all we had to do after that was wait to see when it would break free and come back to life. Suspense. And it did. After a few weeks and 8 days without reporting, the buoy showed up close to the shore. And all the credit goes to Russ Miller for managing to recover it from the unstable frozen conditions. So it took a few days to approach it in a safe manner, but eventually the buoy was recovered safely, and it's now, I have been back at the lab, and it's now redeployed somewhere else. And in Hayden's words, some spotters might be put up for sacrifice over the next winter. So not by design, but they seem to work on ice. And finally, I wanted to present the work done by the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And these slides were kindly prepared by Josh Anderson, who works with Chinwoo, that many of you may know. And the university partners with various agencies shown here on the screen to create the Whisk Watch monitoring network. Did you see the karate kick? Yeah, I should play again. Hold on. Yeah. And because of the archipelago, the wave conditions can vary dramatically between highly sheltered and exposed locations. So this has caused multiple emergency situations in recent years for kayakers. So they've been installing a whole lot of buoys over there and kicking them occasionally, it seems. This is the mooring block, not the actual buoy they kick. I hope you noticed. And this is the web portal for Whisk Watch that can easily be found online. The real-time and historical data observed by the spotters is provided, and the work is ongoing to integrate the forecast to the framework. There's been a great positive public feedback, and you can see on the screen the web stats, and with over 20,000 page prints over the past while. Also, the local community says that they appreciate the low profile of the spotter buoy because they do not detract from the natural beauty of the area. I've never seen an ugly wave buoy personally. And now I'll briefly present a couple of other projects happening in other regions. This here, Aqualink, is a great story of an organization using our devices to scale up marine monitoring measurements. And coral reefs are on the decline. Everyone here knows that, unfortunately. And Aqualink is a non-profit organization delivering our buoys to citizen scientists around the world to capture marine heat waves. And when I say citizen scientists, it's literally just concerned citizens. That can be a plumber, a teacher, anyone can apply to this program. And they're already monitoring over 200 sites that you can see on the map here, and with our wave buoys equipped with temperature strings. And once again, that's especially a great story because they managed to deploy this vast network during the pandemic, and all done remotely. And last but not least, this is my pet project. It's my great pleasure and honor to present this project that is funded by the National Science Foundation, and with the 3 amazing directors of the Pacific Northwest, Pacific Islands, and Alaska Regional Observing Systems, Shana, Jen, and Melissa. If you know them, you will agree with me that they are quite amazing to work with. And we call this project Backyard Buoys. I was voting for Backstreet Boys. This was rejected. Anyway, so the intention really is to provide real-time marine devices to underserved remote indigenous communities in these 3 regions. But we really want the findings and the framework for this program to be reusable anywhere else, and not just through IOOS, but anywhere else on the planet. So it's been really amazing to see what's happening in the region here and the engagement with the indigenous communities. Because the coastal communities in these 3 regions really want to increase their autonomy with regards to the maintenance, the oversight of the ocean data collection. And it's obviously much needed for their day-to-day life, to use the ocean safely, launch canoes, for example, but also to start collecting important baseline data for climate adaptation studies. We just finished the first year of this project. It was very much a desktop study at this stage. We're preparing for phase 2 that hopefully will be funded when we actually start giving people some wave buoys to deploy. And I will stop here. I hope that wasn't too long. Thank you for your attention and inviting us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. And assuming you're staying this evening, and lots of questions for you, I'm sure. So sincerely appreciate that. All right. Well, we're getting to that time of the day where you've been sitting in the chair most of the day. You've had a hot dog and a root beer. You've listened to Sebastian jokes, which were funnier than mine, which is awesome. And now we're ready to do it, right? We're ready to launch Seagull, which is pretty exciting. And in order to do that, Kelly and I are going to take care of this. Now, this may look like a cheap $5 button from Staples, but it's not. It's actually an IoT device that's wired to our code base on GitHub. And when Kelly presses this button, it's literally going to launch Seagull. It's going to change code in the code base. And then we're going to go hit the try Seagull button and see if it worked. We've never done this before, which is kind of risky from a software development standpoint, but let's see if it works. Kelly, any words you want to say before we launch?
Thank you, Tim. I guess since you've given me the mic, I will just say thank you to all our partners, DIG, Spin Dance, RPS, who worked so hard on this, obviously the GLOS team as well, and all of our partners and data providers who've made this possible. I really feel like this is not just a success for GLOS, but for the Great Lakes at large. And I hope you can all benefit from this in the future. And I'm told that we actually have to do a countdown in order for the thing to work. So we're going to start from 5. If everyone could say with me, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Did you hear it? I heard the code change. That's it. Seagull launched. Now let's go try it, see if it worked. I'm not moving that slowly just to build suspense. Here we go. Would Seagull? Absolutely not. I don't trust this thing. And there we have Seagull, everybody. It's live. All right, now the best part is now that you can see it really is a real product, not just demonstrations and stuff. Now you can also access Seagull, and I'm told that we stress tested this with like 10 users or something. I mean, 1,000 users. So we should be able to adequately accommodate all of you and all of your friends and your moms as we do this. But most importantly, and I think this came up multiple times today, this is not the end. This is a continuation and an evolution that will. But the only way that's really going to happen is if we get your feedback. So the only last demo we want to show before we part for the evening and for the day is how to do that feedback. As you can see, we built this right into Seagull, super easy. You don't need to fill out any complicated stuff. Click the top orange bar, a little form pops up and an overlay also appears. So if you say, well, you know, this search box is a little too big for my liking, or I could maybe, this is really hard to do on this screen, or maybe you say, you know, I think there's a problem with this buoy. You can type it in and you say, should be decommissioned or something, whatever it is, right? And then you give your email address. This is not an email, you know, I'm just like typing one-handed on it anyway. And then, or you can even drag and drop, or you can put an attachment or whatever you like and you hit submit. That goes right into our queue. We monitor all this on a regular basis. And then it works its way into, guess what? Another user story. And that's how we do everything through user stories. We say, you know, as a user or as a developer, I would like to see this buoy decommissioned because it's not actually there anymore, or whatever the enhancement is. That was a terrible example. But, you know, this could be anything from, we had one of our users say, you know what? The text is too small. I can't read it. I'm actually an older gentleman and I'm not able to read it. Fine. So we made it bigger. It was a great enhancement, not something that our ADA team or any of us picked up in our own testing. So that's the value of users and that's the value of the feedback. And that's why we built it right in the app to make it dead simple. So with that, I think we can safely, conclude the GLOS annual meeting. Thank you for your patience and your diligence and putting up with me and all my bad dad jokes. And also thank you again to all of our sponsors. I'm not even going to try to list them all because yesterday I forgot one. It was terribly embarrassing. So, but I think you know who they are. They're all here. They're all coming tonight and we really appreciate your sponsorship. We wouldn't be able to have the event tonight without our sponsors. So sincerely thank them, but there'd be no point in having the event tonight if you weren't here. So please, thank you for coming. Thank you for going to the event tonight. And if you got anything else, talk to me or Kelli or any of the GLOS team. And thanks again. Wait, where's the, we're going downstairs to the end of the building and up to the rooftop bar. It's called Offshore Rooftop. Great, we'll see you there.
Yeah, otherwise. We'll have to let what's her name back into our room though, but we'll figure it out. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
No.
They basically remember like the language in the RFA to say this generic, and I committed to
She's like, okay, so I can do this. So I just put it in right. Yeah, great. I saw your